on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
First weekend in October, Dylan. And we missed it.
I'm so well rested.
We're bringing a late episode once again. Thank you to our loyal listeners who stick around, even though this year has been a bit chaotic and hectic, and we haven't maintained our regular scheduled programming.
We have to apologize so much lately, and I feel like a piece of shit for it.
You are a piece of shit.
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're amazing.
No, we love our listeners.
Our listeners understand that life happens and we're not full-time podcasters.
We love them, and every time we are held up, know that it is bothering us. It bothers us. We need to do this, and then we have other extenuating circumstances preventing us.
Extenuating?
Is that right?
It's extenuating.
Yeah,
but I like that you
too.
created your own word
Well,
because it's almost like extenuating. I like that.
It was extraneous, you know? I mean, and it prevents us from fulfilling our obligation that we or feel deeply connected to the listeners. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, Dylan. Before we started the show, you were talking about some of the true crime headlines, and you're like, how are these things even real? So what caught your eye specifically? What made you say that?
It's like I've been telling you lately, everything I watch TikTok feeds, and I watch 6-year-olds getting arrested by police from an elementary school, and I just keep telling you, this can't be real. It's like someone's playing one big trick on all of us, you know what I mean?
Or cops literally chasing somebody that hasn't broken a law at all and then wants to aggressively arrest them.
Yeah.
And then their sergeant's like, you don't even understand the basic, like, Constitution, Bill of Rights.
Protected free speech in public.
And these people are issued a gun.
So, and it just continues everywhere I turn. I'm just like, this can't be real. It's what really adds to my theory of the simulation, you know, that we are living in a simulation. So here, open people, and people know this is where I go for my true crime because I'm boring. And California mom had stabbed to death in front of her 5 children who lost their father 4 years ago. I mean, that's a lot in a headline, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't that seem like a lot? I mean,
it's terrible.
It doesn't even seem possible.
It just seems like some of the worst tragedy ever. And why does it just happen to this like one family? It's really heartbreaking.
And poor Keith Papini, he told cops he was blindsided by wife Sherry's kidnapping hoax. He refers to himself as the idiot husband. I just feel bad for that guy. I feel bad that she came back. You know, she should just stayed kidnapped.
He filed for divorce, right?
I'm sure.
Good for him.
Good for him.
Good for him.
He'll find somebody
Dylan,
that loves him.
There's been a lot of discussion as true crime continues to climb in popularity about ethics in true crime. And with the release of the Netflix Dahmer series, a lot of families, like the victims' families, were very displeased with the story, the depiction, and they didn't support the show coming out. Now, there are those on the other side who say, you know, it's public information. The Dahmer story has been told, you know, 3 ways to Sunday over the last 30 years. This isn't
new information.
Really new. And
right.
If you don't like it, then don't watch it,
well,
right? But then, on the heels of this discussion, Dylan, Lifetime, you know Lifetime.
Oh, I know Lifetime. Give My Baby Back movies, right?
My Stepson, My Lover. They have a movie, totally cringe, about the Gabby Petito murder.
Really?
And again, folks are like, it's too soon. You are exploiting this girl's death only a year after it happened. And on top of it, we don't even 100% factually know what happened. Like, we don't really know the story. I mean, we know she was murdered, but we don't like know the circumstances around it. And so filling in these like dramatizations that you are not even 100% sure they're factual, people are very upset about it.
So
I think it poses an interesting question.
here's the thing. When we were watching, I said this to you when we were watching Dahmer, first couple of episodes, that there's going to be backlash over this. And on this one, honestly, I gotta fall on the side of the victims' families, that the brutality of these scenes is very disturbing to me, and I'm not connected by family to the murders or anything. So I could only imagine how it made the victims' families feel to know that this is out there and being celebrated.
No, okay.
You know
so
what I'm
I
saying?
think I have mixed feelings on the subject. One, I thought that it was like a wow docuseries or whatever. This, I mean, I guess it wasn't really a docuseries, but this, miniseries or whatever was like. I mean, the first episode, I thought it was terrifying.
Oh yeah,
It was scary, and just based on the interviews and stuff, I do feel like they really kind of captured like the essence.
Well,
of
they
Dahmer
did,
with
and
it.
that's what's so scary
And
about
Evan
it.
Peters is amazing. However, there is something about a visual reenactment of this. The implied, this is what's happened. Even if it's not graphically showing, it's like you're still getting it, shoved in your face. And it's really different for me to see that visual than to read about what he did or hear a podcast about what he did. Is when you're like seeing it played out, and even the terror in these actors' faces, can't even cover how the victims were feeling at the time. Really terrifying. I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed, I guess, watching it as a true crime person, and I thought it was well done. But I get where the families are coming from. And as a true crime podcaster, sometimes we joke around. I feel like we really try to be mindful of victims and treat them with respect. And if anything, we make fun of the assailant or the perpetrator.
The shitbirds.
The shitbirds. But, we have covered a case, and we did have like a family reach out to us, and they totally cussed us out about reporting things that were in the newspaper, telling us we didn't know the whole story and we were liars. We were just making shit up. And it's like,
Right.
no,
So
this is literally printed in the newspaper and in court documents. But so I get that families do get upset about it, and we don't always ask permission from families. Is it okay to cover this case? But at the same time, it is public information, and you have to ride this fine line between, like, I guess what's appropriate and what's not.
Well, see, that's the thing with the Dahmer series, is too well done. And I think that's what works against it in that respect.
That's a good way to put it.
It is, it's visceral.
It is a visceral experience, for
sure. If you can watch that first episode there and just be unmoved, then you're likely a sociopath or a psychopath for real, because it's just so, I don't know, it's just, they nail it.
And I'm not a cancel culture person, but I guess my thought is put your money where your mouth is. And if you don't like something, then don't support it. Like, we had a conversation earlier this year about one of the big networks, and we don't know who that is, was going to put together like a Casey Anthony documentary. And we both were like, we're not going to fucking watch that. Like, she's an evil bitch.
It was Netflix.
I don't want to, was it?
Yeah.
I think it was unnamed, and we were speculating.
I felt like it was Netflix, because then I joked that I still have my Netflix subscription.
Yeah, I'm not 100%
really,
sure. But, we were like, fuck her. We're not going to watch anything relating to her. So I guess there's that. Like, I'm not saying to go around cancel everybody who did the Dahmer thing. But if you don't like something, then just don't watch it and don't support it.
Well, yeah, that's everyone's right. And I think that's what's missing today. If you don't like it, just don't support it and withdraw your support online, financially, or whatever, and just move on about your business, right? That's what we've done all our lives growing up. If you didn't care for something, you moved on and you didn't, support it. But nowadays, it's like people are like, that offends me.
You have to get everyone on
then
board.
I need to modify everything around me to fit my feelings. And that right there is, I think, a ridiculous concept.
Yeah, again, I think it's a fine line, and I have mixed feelings about it. But I have to say the Gabby Petito story, I don't know. I'm not going to watch it. I'm not into Lifetime movies all that much. but it does seem like it's a little too soon. And I think the fact that we don't have all the details in the case and it is so fresh in the public's mind, maybe it's, wait a couple years to put it together. I don't know.
Well, I think with
But-
something like the Dahmer thing, it's been, 20 years ago.
1991 was like I think the year he was arrested.
That's why they're able to do what they did with the series, is because of the age, and every single scrap of information has come out, from everyone
Well, we have
involved.
thousands of, podcasts, books, interviews with Dahmer, interviews with his father.
He was a chatty Cathy.
He was a chatty Cathy.
Much
So
like
I feel
the
like
BTK.
it does kind of give you some perspective, some insight, because he does have some introspectiveness about him when he's discussing like why he did these things, which I think is why we watch true crime and we listen to podcasts and we want to know, is because we want to know how a person gets to this point that this is what they're doing, right? We all, I think, want to understand the psychology. And with Dahmer, I think we got a glimpse into the mind of madness. But with Brian Laundrie and Gabby Petito, we were left with such scant information that it's almost still a mystery as to what really happened.
It was like we
that
had
just throwing some shitty movie together and casting people that are like in their 40s to play like 20-year-olds is like, come on, guys.
Well, I think
I don't know.
people felt like they had all the information because of the way it played out, kind of on Instagram and online.
YouTube and shit.
So people feel like they got all the information as it was happening, which I don't think is the case.
I still feel very confused about that case.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us feel that way. Moving along, Dylan, then we're going to get into our case. The month of October, we are covering cases in our home state. We are in North Carolina.
We done come home.
Raise up.
We're like them old roosters.
But first, one more bit of information, I promise we'll shut up, is we want to tell you about a true crime calendar, 2023 true crime calendar, and we're going to be part of it, Dylan.
I'm going to be the whole calendar is going to be about me.
Now, let me tell you about it, Dylan. There is a pre-order sale that's going to give our listeners an additional 10% off. This will expire on November 30th of this year. So act now. We have a promo code that will give them $5 off. And that promo code, Mountain Murders.
We got a promo code?
Yeah. And the cool thing, Dylan, not only do you get 10% off, $5 off, both promos are combinable.
Whoa.
So you're going to get like a 10% discount and a $5 discount.
That in my book, that's like 15% discount.
If you order before November 30th. All you got to do is go to podcastcalendars.com to make your purchase. And we're really excited about it.
I can't wait to see it. It's so cool to be part of something that is really cool like this. Like, who hasn't dreamed as a small child of being on a calendar? I
always wanted to be that kitten, like hanging from the limb by the like one paw that's like
Hang in there.
Hang in there.
The inspirational posters. But no, seriously, I think it's great, and I can't wait to see the finished product.
Oh yeah, it's going to be so awesome. Again, that's podcastcalendars.com. Pre-sale. Go ahead and pre-order that calendar up until November 30th. Use that 10% off coupon that you're going to get with that pre-sale and our promo code, which is going to give you $5 off. And again, that promo code is Mountain Murders. But it is a true crime podcast calendar. Each month, they're going to feature different true crime podcasts. So it may give you some new podcasts to listen to. And it's really cool as well, Dylan, because they are like plugging in facts, like true crime facts each month.
Yeah, see, I thought this was the coolest element of the calendar is they have like big news and true crime on that day marked on the calendar, right?
And there's additionally news on the calendar and dates about your favorite podcasts.
Really?
It's super cool. I'm very excited to be part of it, and I hope that you will order your true crime calendar today. Let's get into today's case, Dylan.
Let's dive in.
Let's do it. After that, 20-minute intro, let's get into it if people are still listening. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to travel down east. We're going down to Raleigh, North Carolina.
Let's
The
get on down
state
there.
Capital.
That's down there by my mama.
I know, right?
Hey, mama.
Hey, Miss Kathy. Michelle Marie Fisher was born February 17th of 1977 to parents Alan and Linda. Alan was an auto dealer, and his wife Linda was a school teacher and a cheerleading coach at the high school where they resided in Sayville, New York, which is on Long Island. All I can think about is the Long Island iced tea right now. About 3 years after Michelle was born, the family welcomed a second daughter named Meredith, and they lived in a middle-class neighborhood, kind of a modest home, not far from the beach. I'm jealous.
That sounds nice.
I live in a modest home by the beach. Though Meredith and Michelle were close, they did often fight like siblings do as they were growing up. But by all accounts, Michelle was a bright, fun-loving girl who was co-captain of the Sayville High School cheerleading squad, even leading them to the Long Island Cheerleading Association Championship in 1995, the year she graduated. Michelle, a National Honor Society member, was, as I mentioned, incredibly smart and focused. Academics was something her parents really pushed, and Michelle didn't even really have to try hard. She was one of those people that was just naturally smart. Even if she didn't study, would ace a test. Again, I'm jealous.
Don't you just hate people like that?
You know, I have to say, I can bullshit my way through a lot of things. So in school, if it was ever like an essay, write a paragraph, if it was history, English related writing, I could pretty much make my way through it. But some things you just can't fake, like math.
80% of essay and writing is BS, right?
Yeah.
It's fluff. It's the fluff in the middle of the subject or whatever. So I can imagine that you'd be rather good at that.
So Michelle was naturally smart and gifted, just everything that you would want to be. And as a parent, everything that you would want your child to be, right? However, life in the Fisher household wasn't always picture perfect. By the time Michelle was 14, her parents were sleeping in separate rooms. Their marriage had all but dissolved, with the couple staying together only for the sake of their girls. But they rarely spoke to one another. And we all know this can be a very dysfunctional situation. Even these folks who try to stay together for the kids sense that tension in the house, and it can really cause issues.
Well, what they should do is
you're not getting a good picture of like what a healthy relationship should be like.
they should split up for the kids' sake. I mean, honestly, that's what they should be thinking about when you end up in that mentality, because like you said, it's just not a healthy household, and the kids know. You know, even if you go out of your way to hide it or argue behind closed doors, they can sense it. They feel it.
Well, and some might point to Michelle's upbringing to explain maybe why she stayed in a marriage later on.
Well, yeah, and that could be learned unhealthy behaviors, right?
Well, as I mentioned, this created a lot of tension in the home, and Michelle seemed to turn her focus onto school and friends, and she was the most popular girl at Sayville High School, like hands down. Just super popular, well-liked. So she really tried to focus on her academics and her friends and being a high school student, more so than dwelling on, like, my home life sucks. With a full semester of advanced placement college courses racked up, she was ready to start a new adventure, and she decided to attend North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. Go Wolfpack. Immediately, Michelle fell in love with the campus and the city. And though North Carolina State at the time accepted very few out-of-state students, Michelle was a shoo-in. At NC State, she found even more success. Michelle made straight A's every semester and was a freshman walk-on the cheerleading squad. In 1996, Michelle was chosen as one of the cheerleaders to participate in the opening ceremony for the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta, and she was elated. Like, this was kind of like the pinnacle of her cheer career.
Wow, she just does it all, right?
She does it all.
Academics, athletic, because cheering is a sport, in my opinion.
Definitely. After finishing out her cheering career with such an accomplishment, Michelle decided to spend the next 3 years focusing on her studies. So she quit cheerleading. But Michelle still attended every football game and basketball game, cheering on the Wolfpack. Talk about a diehard fan. Like, Michelle was bleeding red and black. Like, she loved the Wolfpack. With more free time, Michelle decided to rush a sorority, and on the rush bus, she met another Michelle from Long Island, and the two became best friends. Both girls decided to join Alpha Delta Pi sorority together. Linda and Alan divorced finally, and Linda bought a condo near NC State, and she watched as Michelle and her close-knit group of friends, they called themselves the McBroads, this group of girlfriends.
McBroads.
Yeah, had a blast together. Her friends called Michelle the camp director because of her type A personality. She was a meticulous planner, very detail-oriented and organized. And so I believe Michelle lived in this condo that her mom bought, like with some of her girlfriends.
So she's like the group mom.
She is. Like if they're going to have a girls' trip, a weekend, if they're going to go to dinner, Michelle is going to map it out. Like she's going to tell you, here's where we're going. This is our reservation time. This is where we're going to park. Like, she has it all mapped out.
She's going to have headache medicine and tissues and things like that inside of her purse.
Yes.
And anything you might need that you didn't realize you would need until you need it.
She's everything we want to be.
I am not that
I'm
person.
just kidding. We just want a friend like Michelle.
Because
I
I'm
am to an extent. But
you
are
are
not.
You are pretty much. I can count on you to pick up my slack. But I'm a very fly by your seat type of person. I'm sure people know that by listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
But that's just how I am. And I try to be, when I try to be organized and all lined up or whatever, a good little soldier, as you would say, it just don't work. It doesn't work.
No, it's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, Dylan. But
yes.
I think that's why we work so well together, even though sometimes you do frustrate me, admittedly. I'm sure I frustrate you a little bit.
Oh, never.
I am more type A in that, like, I want to plan things out. I want to know what's happening, when it's going to happen. I need details. If I don't know all the information, it, like, gives me some serious anxiety. Like, I have to know how things are going to go. And if we go on a vacation, I'm like a meticulous planner. I'm Googling before we get there, like, here's where we're going, and we should do it on this day. And, like, I have it all. And I bought tickets, and we have to be there at this time. And you're not like that, bro. You're just like, wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning, look at your watch, and you're like, I think I'm going to drive to Alabama today.
Well, that's why it works for me.
And then just get in the car and go, and you don't even, like, know where you're going. You just end up somewhere.
I'll just tell you, we should go such and such, and then you, like, plan out the whole trip.
And then you're like, I'm just going to go sit and look.
And next thing I know, I have this great trip planned for me.
Yeah.
And I am told and directed what I should do every day, and I have a great time.
You love it.
Yeah.
You like being directed.
So Michelle is the group mom.
She's the camp director.
And she doesn't, and I'm sure her friends love her for that because that's a very important position.
She's probably always got snacks, right? It's like, what's in mom's bag? She's got snacks. She's probably got tampons, Band-Aids. You got a bloody nose. She's got some tissue or a tampon you can stick up in your nose. I mean, she's prepared. You got to run in your pantyhose. She probably got an extra pair in there.
Happens
Hairspray, glove, and whatever you need.
Happens to me all the time.
You need some WD-40? Check Michelle's bag. She probably got it. One of those people. However, this divorce between her parents left Michelle with a fractured relationship with her dad. Alan quickly remarried a woman named June. Michelle and June did not get along from the beginning. And at one point, June forbade the oldest daughter from visiting their home in New Jersey. So she didn't even want her stepdaughter in her house. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of information about what transpired between Michelle and her stepmother. But they were not on speaking terms, did not get along, to the point that Michelle was told, don't come to my house.
And that's a very toxic situation.
No, not good. So Alan seemed to side with his new wife, and his relationship with his daughter Michelle came to a standstill, which has to be a hard choice for a parent to make.
It's no choice.
And I think
there's no choice to be made there, in my opinion. If you're, like, when we got together, if you were toxic towards my children, then that would be a no-go. It'd be a game changer for me.
Yeah, but I think it's unfair to make the assumption that maybe June was totally... I mean, maybe there was a good reason why Alan sided with his wife.
Well, and that's possible. I mean, I guess if his children were being, ridiculous about the situation or not giving her a chance, then, yeah, that's a good point to make.
Well, I only came to this conclusion, Dylan, because through my research, when we get into the aftermath, like after our case kind of concludes, the behavior of some of Michelle's relatives, kind of questionable.
Okay,
So
do tell.
So we'll talk about it. Michelle wanted to be an accountant. She eventually finished her master's in 2000 and took the 4-part CPA exam, passing everything on the first try. So this 4-part exam, from what I understand, pretty tough. And she just passes it flying colors first try. Again, super smart girl. She went to work at Deloitte and Touche in downtown Raleigh, which was like a big accounting firm. In February 2001, Michelle was celebrating her 24th birthday with friends at the Poorhouse in downtown Raleigh, which is funny. I used to go to the Poorhouse when I lived there. When a guy accidentally knocked over her glass of wine. So kind of like a big goofy guy like you. His name was Jason Young. The pair started chatting, learning they were both recent NC State graduates, passionate Wolfpack fans. Because, nothing's going to bring people together like their favorite sports team.
I'm bleeding red and black.
It's true. Jason had moved back home to Brevard, North Carolina. So just over the hill from Austin, where he was living with his parents, working for Black & Decker. He just happened to be in town visiting friends the weekend of Michelle's birthday. Though it was no love at first sight, the pair did seem to hit it off. It didn't take long for the weekend trips to Raleigh to visit Michelle for this relationship to turn more serious. So they bump into each other, chat, and then that develops into more weekend trips.
He has that silly story about spilling her wine on her.
He's got to,
Excuse me,
he's going to go
baby.
visit friends, but he's really like seeing this girl while he's down there.
Let me dab that off of you, off your crotch. Tell that goofy story. No?
Get you some seltzer water or something.
Oh, yeah. If only he knew how to lift the stain.
Jason decided to move to Raleigh full-time, renting a townhouse with his college friend Ryan Shad. Soon, Jason landed a great job as a pharmaceutical rep with Pan American Labs. Those who knew the couple said they were total opposites. Not only in appearance, Michelle had dark hair, Jason was blonde, but she had a heavy New York accent, and Jason was a mountain boy who spoke with a slow southern drawl. Michelle, the type A personality, was attracted to Jason's playful nature. He was a free spirit who seemingly floated through life with no plans, loved practical jokes, and was the life of the party. Like Mr. Good Time guy.
Sounds like me.
I know.
You're describing.
It's exactly when I heard. I was like, opposites do attract.
I'm a free spirit.
You're something, Dylan. I'll give you that.
My wings must be unbound so I can fly high.
You're like R. Kelly.
No, I'm not.
You believe you can fly. You're going to touch the sky.
Don't you dare compare me to that molester.
I was just thinking of the song.
I'm sorry.
Then you're Bette Midler. You're the wind beneath everyone's
Thank
wings.
you.
Okay?
Please keep it wholesome. I cannot separate the artist from their work. Screw him.
It didn't even seem to bother Michelle that her man, who was a few years removed from college, still behaved like a frat boy. She was attracted to his charismatic personality and good looks. Okay, I think we probably all know this guy. He's like a big kid, goofball, doesn't take anything seriously, charming, and that can be good for a while.
Is he tall?
I think he's tall.
I know this guy's tall. He's like 6'2", 6'3", this dashing, athletic body.
I mean, he's...
No?
I mean, I guess...
Just to let me live in my fantasy.
No, he's trim. he looks tall. I don't know about his... He's not my type in the face.
Ah.
Okay? I'll just say that.
He's not chubby enough for you. Yes. She likes her men with a little bit of meat on them, if you know what I'm saying. Steer me back right, dude. This is going off the rails.
I'm just saying that a lot of times this can be fun for
a little while.
Dating.
Well,
but when you try to get into a long-term relationship with this person, there could be issues.
Here's the thing. It's funny sometimes when the thing that attracts you to a person
becomes the thing you don't like about that person.
actually can detract from that person as you do
Over
enter
time.
into a long-term relationship. That's a very good point. And
as people grow, mature,
well, your goals change
a lot. I mean, we
Yeah.
all change. I'm quite different than when I was in my 20s versus in my 30s.
I've heard.
And then now, so
Yeah.
people Yeah, well, at least I've evolved. You're still the same
Hey,
fucking clown that you were 20 years ago.
you
So
were
there's that. Okay.
in the car yesterday talking about how our entire generation is just adult kids.
We are.
And we will never grow up. We refuse. We're like the Toys R Us of adults.
It's true. It's true.
Okay.
Okay, clown. Are you ready? Let's continue.
I'm thinking about the giraffe now. Sorry.
Jason Lynn Young was born in the picturesque Blue Ridge Mountains of Brevard, North Carolina. If you've never been to Brevard, it is gorgeous, land of the waterfalls.
It is beautiful in Brevard.
Perfect hiking there. Beautiful waterfalls, pristine. I think of the film, what is it, Land of the Mohicans?
It's the last of the Mohicans.
Last of them, I couldn't think of it. That was filmed in the Brevard area.
And Chimney Rock.
Like around like Toxaway. And anyway, it's gorgeous up there. So he grew up in this pretty mountain town, small town. His mother, Pat, like Linda, was also a teacher. She had taken 8 years off from teaching to raise her 3 children. She had Kim, born in 1972, Jason, born in 74, and a daughter named Heather. Perfect name for a 70s, 80s kid, right? Born in 76. I just feel like Heather's such a time-stamped name.
It is.
Of a certain generation. Just like today, you don't get a lot of like little girls born that are named Beulah, but you get a lot of, like Addisons and stuff. Heather's just a very 70s,
Madison.
80s name, right?
Addison, Madison.
I feel like Heather and Dylan are like characters on 90210 or something. Anyway.
Ah, yes.
We are so the products of our time. When Jason was only 5 years old, his father Bob was diagnosed with cancer and died soon after. Pat struggled as a single mom financially, trying to raise her 3 kids. And when Jason was 6, Pat met a man named Gerald McIntyre, a machinist, with a company that was associated with the Winchester Corporation, as in like Winchester rifles. And Gerald was an avid hunter, took Jason shooting, trap shooting, shooting skeet, taught him all about guns, hunting. And from what I understand, Jason was he became like an avid outdoorsman. Like his stepdad really influenced him. Why are you looking at me like that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going over a shooting skeet joke in my head, but I'll just leave it there.
But Jason was kind of an annoying brother. His sister said he was always needling them, doing anything to get a rise out of them, often pranking the family to the point it could be obnoxious. Yet no one could get mad at him for very long because he was so charming and goofy. Like he was just such a lovable goofball that even if he did something that really pissed you off, in like 5 minutes, you'd already forgotten about it.
Yeah. That's like me too.
I don't forget, though, Dylan. I lock it away in my brain.
There's nothing more refreshing. Nothing more refreshing than someone who reminds you of something that happened like 5 years ago and won't let it go. That's just really, that's their love language. You know what I mean?
Growing up, Jason was an athlete who played soccer and basketball. He, again, like I mentioned, was an avid outdoorsman, liked hiking, was a Boy Scout. He was voted best all around at his high school. Like Michelle, he was incredibly popular and well-liked. Jason spent his summers working at various summer camps in Brevard. The girls at the camp adored him. One girl, who was 4 years younger, had even developed this like intense crush on Jason. And even after he stopped being a camp counselor, the pair would see each other a few times a year. And when they got a little older, would kind of like hook up here and there. And she's going to come back into our story later, so tuck that away. But he had never noticed that this girl had like genuine feelings for him because he's such a like la 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 kind of out and about goofball that it's like never occurred to him that, wait a minute, she's not in this just for a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, Jason's probably not going to notice something like that.
After graduation, Jason knew he wanted to go to NC State, but took a gap year off to hike the Appalachian Trail. Though he typically had a short attention span, the 2,190-mile hike proved he could set his mind to something and make it happen. So it was a big accomplishment for him, and he was able to prove to himself that he could be goal-oriented if he really wanted to be. When he returned to college in 1994, Jason spent more time attending sporting events and partying than focusing on his studies. It took him 6 years to get a bachelor's degree at NC State. So, 6-year college student. It happens. He and his two buddies pulled all their money together to buy lifetime rights to season tickets to Wolfpack football and basketball games. So he was a diehard fan. And though he loved the games, the tailgating before was his favorite part. Have you ever been tailgating at a game, Dylan?
I have not. It seems like a lot of fun.
Yeah. I have a good friend who went to UT, like recently, was always a Tennessee Vols fan.
Vols.
The Volunteers, bro.
The Vols.
Vols.
Don't call them Vols.
I'll call them whatever the fuck I want.
You know how close we are to that stadium right now?
I'm going to call them the Vols.
It's the Volunteers, Heather.
I'm going to call them the Vols. Okay? Don't look at me like that.
Say it one more time.
The Vols.
Ah, damn
The
it.
Vols.
It's the balls.
Anyway,
We apologize to all
you know,
Tennessee
guy,
fans.
like, I go to his apartment and laugh at him because his closet's like a fucking sea of orange, right? And he would talk about going to the football game and be like, I'm going to drag you to this game. You're going to go. And I was like, because I'm not a sports fan. But he'd be like, no, you don't understand. The tailgating is like 8-hour event.
That's just one big party.
People cooking out, partying, you know, everybody's drinking and having a good time and sharing food and whatever. I'll be honest, none of that appeals to me because I don't like crowds.
Well, it's just like when we go catch music there in Charlotte, people seem to take the tailgating pretty
They do.
serious before the concerts. And I think it's just a way to socialize and kind
The
of...
best tailgating before a show is if you go to a Jimmy Buffett concert.
Oh, yeah?
Parrot heads know how to party.
So there's a lot of hamburgers and margaritas?
Hawaiian shirts, a little smoky smoke, people putting it up in the air,
Putting something up in the air, huh?
munching on a damn pineapple. I'm just saying it's fun.
Is it grilled pineapple with cinnamon on it?
Does it matter?
Yeah.
Pineapple's fucking delicious. Anywho, so sometimes Jason would get drunk in the parking lot and not even make it into the game. So again, Dylan, I feel like you and Jason have a lot in common. Okay? Although I have to commend you, you have not been drinking, and I appreciate that.
I'm dry.
I know, I
I'm
love
dry.
it. You're sober as a judge.
Well, I don't know if I'd go so far to call me sober.
No, I have to say, I'm very proud of you, Dylan, because we went to Atlanta over the weekend. We went to Oakland Cemetery. And if you listen to Haunted Georgia, we talked about Oakland Cemetery. But we went to Oakland Cemetery on Saturday, one of Dylan's fly by the seat of the pants trips, right? I said we could go have a beer. Well, I was like giving you permission. So we went and they had like this Oktoberfest beer list. We got this really delicious German beer. I don't even know what it was. It was pretty fucking good.
It's pretty good. Their taps were not set cold enough.
I know you were complaining, but I thought the beer was pretty decent.
Beer started warming in my hand as soon as he started handed it to me. And but no, I only had one.
But you only had one. That was my point. Is I said you can even have an extra if you want. I will buy you an extra beer because you've been so well behaved. And you were like, no, I'm good. And you're like, I don't even really have a taste for it anymore. But then, of course, you started complaining about the taps not being cold enough.
And in my defense, the edible had kicked in, and I was high as fuck. But so, like I said, I don't
Well, you
know
didn't
that.
you didn't have to tell them that part.
Well, hey, look, I'm a realist, and I don't want to be misrepresented to the listeners.
Okay, so I'm bragging on you, and then you just come back like, well, I'm not drunk, but I was high as fuck. Okay, Dylan. We get it. You trade one vice for the other.
I do.
Now, among his friends, Jason had a reputation as a horn dog. I think we could see Jason as a horn dog, what we know about him, right? He had many sexual conquests, but rarely serious girlfriends. He had been an RA in college and was known to hook up with all the pretty girls that lived on his floor and in the building. So, just guy, a young man about town, making the rounds.
Now, would you sex up your RA,
No.
or is that one of those lines you just wouldn't
I
cross?
was an RA.
Ah.
Okay.
Did you get sexed up?
No.
No.
But I did have. Okay. So the first time I was an RA, I was in an all-female dorm. So that was, fine. It was super easy, no problems. It was mostly upperclassmen, quiet, Sweet gig. Next year, when I decided to RA, I only did it for 1 semester because I got stuck in a freshman dorm. Co-ed floor. One of the only co-ed floors, like, in any of the dorms. And it's freshmen. I called it Halcest because they were all hooking up. And it was so much drama and so much... Oh, that was the worst fucking job. Like, I should have gotten paid money to be a counselor because all I was doing was listen to problems about I hooked up with him and then he's cheating on me with a girl down the hall and then, you know, he did. Anyway, it was just always something. But I had a freshman. His name was Jeff. And he would not leave me alone and followed me around like a puppy dog. And I would have to tell him, like, I cannot date you. 1, I'm your RA. And 2, like, I'm not interested. And he would not leave me alone. And I have a weird story about... him, but you know, no, that, I mean, when I'm in a professional capacity, I keep it professional. I'm not gonna shit where I eat, as they say. Like, I'm never gonna hook up with somebody I work with. If I'm in a position of power, authority, I'm not ever gonna like cross that line.
If Jeff was listening right now, what would you say to him?
Dude, give it up. Okay, so let me quick tell you this part.
All these years later, that's the only message you got for Jeff?
Let me tell you
what the hell, dude?
Real quick, let me tell you the story. Okay, so this is the guy, Jeff, freshman. This is the first semester of my senior year, right? So I'm like 22. He's 18, right out of high school. Not that that's a huge age difference, but, you know, it was
when you're 22, you feel like you're like worlds ahead of an 18-year-old.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about what, you know, careers, getting a resume together. I mean, all the things you're thinking about when you're getting ready to finish up school, where I'm going to live, what I'm going to do. Like, how the hell can I just not go back to my parents' house? Like, you know what I mean? Okay, so I go to this party. It was a toga party with my girlfriends. I had this like group of girls that, you know, would party together all the time. And they were all in a sorority and I was not, but like I was sort of like the token friend who was the non-Greek, but was always at their sorority stuff. So they would always be like, oh, you're kind of like a sister, but you're not. So anyway, I go with my Zeta girls to this party, frat party, toga party. You know, we're all wearing our sheets, fucked up, whatever. He's there. Follows me around the whole night, and I'm just like, dude, whatever. But he's so drunk, like so drunk he can't walk. And so when my girlfriend, her name was Ro, was like, I'm going to give everybody a ride back to campus. You know, come on. I felt bad, this kid who's like, because he had stayed at the party, I guess thinking that he was going to hang out with me. And I was like, dude, you need to go on with your friends. But they left him and he didn't have a ride and whatever. So I was like, okay, we're going back to the dorm. I'll give you a ride. I felt like I couldn't leave him in that condition. We all pile in my friend's SUV. She had like a Ford Explorer or something. Well, she popped the trunk and we put Jeff in the trunk.
You put him in the back?
Well, we didn't have room, right? This whole car is like shoved full of women, right? So we put him in the back, and Ro had one of those like styrofoam, like the big styrofoam cooler boxes. Of course, because we'd had all our beer and shit in there, and it was empty by this time. But she's got the big styrofoam cooler back there. So he's like laying back there like, ugh. We pull up to the dorm, like 2, 3 in the morning, fire drill.
No.
Everybody's standing outside.
Everybody's outside?
My boss, like the building manager, all the RAs, all the freshmen, everybody who didn't go home that weekend. So, you know, you got like hundreds of people standing out in this parking lot.
Pissed off because they've been woken up.
Here comes Ro pulling up, got like Afro Man blasting, like loud as fuck, car full of drunk sorority girls, like hooting and hollering and like, you know, yelling out the window and shit at people. I was like, oh no. Like, y'all come, like, you have to stop, quit being obnoxious, you know, because this is like, my boss is there and whatever. Well, anyway, I get out of the vehicle, and of course, by this time, everybody's turned and looked at us. So it's like all eyes on me as I get out in my fucking toga. And I'm like, okay. Then she pops the latch on the trunk or whatever.
And Jeff spills out.
He fucking tumbles, yes, onto the pavement, the parking lot, right in front of the building. Everybody watching. Here comes the styrofoam cooler. And the next thing I know, he grabs it and just starts puking in this cooler in front of everybody. And I was like, oh my God. what do I do? And then I was like, you okay there, buddy? And he's like, I'm okay. Whatever. And I was like, okay, well, you have a good night then. Glad we made it back safe. And then just like walk up, like,
Just
hey,
walk
guys.
away.
Well, he's like, and the car drives off and this kid's in the parking lot just puking in this cooler. I was like, this is such not a good look. And I had to explain to the building manager. He was a cool guy, Chuck, what had happened. And he understood, but not a good scene, Dylan.
Okay.
So I would never hook up with a freshman when I was an RA. I'm just saying. It was a bad choice.
Well, I see that was the message you had all these years later for Jeff
But here's Jason.
after this experience.
RA, he don't care, right?
Yeah, so Jason's
he
making it
thinks you're
happen.
a pretty lady. He's going to holla at you and hook up with you on his little twin bed in his
And
little dorm room.
this kind of behavior is how he could have repeated contact with the camp girl and not realize that maybe she wants a more serious relationship from this than he does,
She's caught feelings.
because he's just doing what Jason does.
Now, he did have one serious relationship with another RA named Genevieve. After graduation, he landed a job with Nike in Charlotte. In October of 1999, making decent money, Jason managed to buy a 3-stone platinum diamond engagement ring for his girlfriend. They planned to marry in the summer of 2000. His fiancée, though, soon realized that Jason had a dark side, which seemed to emerge when he was drinking. She said he would get mad at her for almost no reason, and the relationship became increasingly volatile. Jason promised to cut back on drinking, but of course that didn't last very long, and by spring of 2000, she dumped him, like before their summer wedding. So that is something that we should keep in mind about Jason, as though he's a happy-go-lucky guy. People say he has this dark side when he's drinking.
Well, when he drinks, he lowers his frequency, and therefore possibly allowing like dark, nefarious energies into himself. And
Is that your theory?
I think that is why alcohol, in particular, and you see it with the meth,
It's the devil's drink.
is you allow yourself to become a vessel for these dark forces, and that's why you can change. You know, when people say that cliche, oh, when they're fine but when they drink, they turn into this other person I don't even recognize. And that's a theory I have, and it could be.
Interesting. Well, I think we probably all know or have known a mean drunk.
Yeah.
Like your granddaughter, you know.
Well,
She's the meanest drunk. I'm just kidding.
So,
See, that's what when you don't want to babysit someone
yeah.
and you keep their kid and they're like, how was...
But she's a mean drunk.
I'm like, she's a mean drunk. And then the parents look at you like, oh my God. And then they never ask you to babysit again.
She's 3.
I'm kidding.
She can't even hold her bourbon.
I would never give a baby bourbon.
No, so Jason has flashed his dark side, and his fiance wasn't having it.
No.
Right? She's like, no, I'm not doing this. Which is, I'm glad to have that self-awareness to not allow yourself to get entrenched in a situation like that. I'm just saying words.
She had
that sound
healthy
good.
boundaries.
Yes.
You know, she knows her self-worth. She knows this is not good, and she has boundaries, and I'm not willing to let you cross this boundary. So go for her. When Jason met Michelle at the poorhouse, he was taken aback by her beauty and her intelligence. They had another chance meeting that weekend at a movie theater. And when they bumped into each other a second time, that's when they sat together. And then, of course, the next time he was in town, Michelle's roommate invited him over to watch a movie. So from then on, Michelle and Jason were a couple. Before long, they were together at every tailgate, and Michelle became the, quote, den mother to all of Jason's friends. And then, of course, she's introducing her friend group to his friend group. There were some love connections among the two friend groups.
They were co-mingling.
One of Michelle's best friends, Shelly, ends up marrying Jason's roommate, Ryan Shad, that the fella he moves in with, and when he moves back to Raleigh. You know, so as you can see, this is like one big happy group of friends. And she would send out these emails to everyone detailing like who should bring what to the games. So every football season, you know, Monday, Michelle's already planning for Saturday and sending out emails and has everything covered. Like pages of emails about who needs to bring the cups, who's bringing the cooler, who's bringing the beer. Yeah.
Man, I bet the tailgate was banging when she was running
Probably,
shit.
and you got like 20 or 30 people meeting up.
Yeah.
It's probably kick ass. Growing up, Michelle had always dreamed of how her life would play out. She would have a long romantic courtship, then a beautiful proposal, followed by a fairy tale wedding. The couple would purchase the house of their dreams, fully furnish it to her taste, and raise their perfect children at home. She wanted the American middle-class dream. But, Dylan, sometimes life gives us surprises.
Life always gives us surprises.
And it's what happens when that pull-out method don't work. So in the summer of 2003, Michelle learned she was pregnant. Her ego was prego. By this time, Michelle was living with Jason at the townhouse owned by his friend Ryan. Though they had been dating 2 years, Michelle knew Jason was afraid of marriage. Like, he had commitment issues. It was a subject they rarely discussed. Anytime the idea of a long-term commitment came up, he's
changing the subject.
He's running for the door. Yet Michelle was positively in love with Jason and felt they could be together forever. At first, she was hesitant to tell him about the baby because she knew he would be unhappy about it. Yet there was part of her that had hoped the baby might encourage him to propose. Thoughts on this, Dylan?
The baby pushing Jason to make a commitment? No.
Yeah.
No, it's going to do the opposite for a guy like him because the baby itself is a huge commitment. You see what I'm saying? And so now you've just loaded this on top of his other commitment issues. A person like Jason, it's going to make them want to run for the hills. Am I right?
Well, I was asking because, seeing that you and Jason share very similar personalities, I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on, is like, a baby in this situation you think going to make things better? Be a good reason to motivate the couple to get married?
We've talked about this before. Babies never fix relationships. If you're having a strained relationship, we've seen this story over and over again. And it's like the woman, I don't want to be like, it's like she thinks maybe if we have this new baby, it'll help everything be better. And it's just adding more stressors to an already strained relationship.
When Michelle told Jason about the unexpected pregnancy, his reaction was disappointing, but let's be honest, predictable. At first, he was fearful, saying he wasn't ready for a child or marriage. But after a week of marinating on the subject, Michelle softened his attitude. Soon he placed a rubber band on her finger until he could go online and order a diamond ring.
Oh, how sweet.
Jason called his mother Pat as soon as he learned he was going to be a father. When his mother asked if he loved Michelle, Jason said yes, he did. Pat knew her son loved being around children and thought it was wonderful that he was going to be a dad. His sister Heather described it as a, quote, big kid having a little kid. So I think we could take maybe positive and negative connotations from that quote. Because he does love kids. He's, like the guy that's always in the grass, like playing football, rolling around with the kids, play fighting, teasing, hanging out. But yeah, he's like a big kid having a kid. So how's that going to work out? So I can kind of see that statement twofold. Linda, who found Jason to be very immature, told him, if you don't love her, don't marry her. She'll survive. And he didn't respond. Michelle had left her job at that accounting firm and was temporarily working a position at NC State. She had no health insurance, and now the pressure of having a baby caused the couple to feel like they needed to rush into marriage so that she could get on Jason's health insurance. So August 12th of 2003, they went to the courthouse and got married. It wasn't the dream wedding Michelle had hoped for, but her mother, Linda, was present. She planned a quick wedding for October before she was showing. Michelle sent a 10-page email to her girlfriends giving them a complete breakdown of the wedding event. Jason handed over all the wedding planning to Michelle, but he made 3 stipulations. The wedding could not take place on a state game day. No wedding up north. It had to be south of the Mason-Dixon line, and he wanted to invite all of his friends and have free-flowing booze.
Now, how would you respond to a man who was like, oh, can't have our anniversary on a big game day, man?
I'd be like, you're the epitome of a mature, grown-ass man.
See, this is why these things that are happening to them is why I said that babies don't fix relationships. Is because it pushes you to do things that you would otherwise wouldn't have
Well,
done.
there's multiple red flags here.
When you're
and I
rushing.
get,
Yeah.
that marriage, or maybe not maybe the marriage, but like the wedding planning, that there probably are quite a few men out there who aren't really interested in talking about floral arrangements or hiring a DJ or sampling cake or, picking out decor or whatever. I mean, I get that. Like, you're not really into that kind of stuff.
The details of wedding
But-
planning make my mind go just numb.
But I think if you are, if we were like, hey, we're going to get married and we're planning this really big wedding because, let's be honest, you and I fly out of the seat of our pants, went to the fucking courthouse and got married because we're classy. But we didn't have a wedding. But if we had a wedding, I feel like even if that wasn't your jam, you still would have been somewhat involved because it's your wedding and you're kind of going to want it to go a certain way. Plus, you're going to want to like make your bride happy, I think, and you're going to want to be an active participant. And so for me, that's a red flag. If a guy's just like, here, you take over, and shows no interest in planning what people sell you as like the biggest day of your life, to me, that's a major red flag.
Well, if he's completely disinterested in anything wedding, then yeah, I think that is a problem.
And more concerned about if it's going to interfere with football season.
And my bros.
Are there going to be booze there? Yeah. That's...
So he just wants that so he can go to his bros and be like, open bar, bro. Like, you know what I mean?
He just like wants to party.
You're putting all that financial stress on yourself to get all your buddies drunk. I don't get it.
Well, the couple waited until the following summer for a honeymoon in St. Martin. Just before the big wedding, Michelle had landed a new job with Progress Energy in their tax department. So she had a lot of changes happening, Dylan, all at once. I mean, she's got a new baby on the way. Of course, hormones, her body's changing. Pregnancy is really rough on a woman's body.
It is.
On a person's body, let's be honest. She's got this big wedding she's just planned, probably cost a fortune, and then this brand new job. It's just like a whirlwind, totally like life-changing events kind of happening in rapid succession. Michelle reportedly loved her new job and didn't want to take a very long maternity break in order to get back to work because she did like this job so much, and she didn't want, for people to think she was not taking it seriously. And though Jason hadn't been hands-on for the wedding planning, he did seem to relish in the idea of having a baby. He attended birthing classes with Michelle and was as distraught as she was when they couldn't have a natural delivery. March 29th of 2004, they welcomed Cassidy Elizabeth Young. It was a difficult delivery with the baby being in a breech position, so they had to do a C-section, despite Michelle's months-long planning for a natural birth. And I know a lot of couples... It is devastating for them to plan on having a natural birth and then to learn they have to, do a C-section. It's an emergency situation. I've never experienced that, but from what I have gathered just from friends and whatnot, it can be a pretty traumatic experience.
Well, I would say so. Now, not only are you giving birth, but you're having this the surgery basically done, which is going to complicate everything as far as you and the baby's concerned.
Yeah.
So, and it happens fast. You don't have time to process or plan. And it's just one of those things, look, the baby's breech. We have to get it out now. And there's really, what can you say? There's really no, oh, let me think about it. It's like, yes, of course, do whatever's best for the baby and me. So, yeah, I could see that being a kind of a whirlwind situation,
Yeah, very overwhelming, right? But he was the first to hold Cassidy and the first to change her diaper. He would happily get up with her in the middle of the night for feedings and loved giving her baths. Jason was known to be lazy when it came to household chores, but always was in the moment with his daughter. So he may not be the best when it comes to unloading the dishwasher or taking out the trash. But when it comes to the baby, he's like right there. He's on top of it. He's an active dad. He's not on his phone. He's always like actively with his little girl and in the moment, which I think is important. And I think I could forgive maybe slack on the household chores.
I don't get that.
If he's a real hands-on,
I don't get the people that's just like, oh, I don't do household stuff.
No, I don't get that either. But I'm just saying, having come from a relationship where maybe the guy wasn't the best hands-on parent.
I'm a domestic goddess.
I might have appreciated having a more hands-on instead of having to do everything.
I was a hands-on baby daddy.
No, you're a great household manager. If I could afford to let you stay home full time,
You'd never worry about
I
a thing.
Bring home the bacon
Yeah.
and support us in our household, I would do it. But you, for whatever reason, make way more money than me.
Whatever reason. You know, I liked kids a lot more back when I was doing the baby thing. And the older I get,
We just don't have the energy.
I don't dislike kids, but it's just like in my mind, I'm just like, it's my turn.
Well, you've moved on.
You know what I mean? I'm just kind of want to do me.
You've stepped out of that parent role. And it happens, you know, when you're young and you have kids, you can be in that moment and like love being a parent and every moment's great. But I think, yeah, when your kids are practically grown and raised up, you've kind of moved on to a new phase of life. And
Yeah.
it's hard to go back to like little kids.
I can't do it.
I'm just tired.
It's very time consuming.
Well, it's just taxing.
And I love them. I love my granddaughter. I love my kids. But, and I try to be, and sometimes I feel like I'm crappy about it. But I'll be like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And then it's time to do it. And I'm just like, I don't want to do that. I mean, is that bad?
I don't know.
Oh, my
Do you think
God.
our grandparents felt that way about us? I felt like my grandparents really loved spending time with me. Maybe it was just a different generation. I don't know.
No, we've had a lot of sidebar this episode, which is okay. I enjoy it. So I hope
Well, we
everyone...
don't always do it, so I think people
yeah.
can be patient when we do get a little silly.
But this is a great story. So let's get back into it.
Well, his daughter adored Jason, and when the two were in the zone, like playing together, it was like nobody else was in the room. They were just solely focused on each other. He could make this baby belly laugh. She loved her daddy. When she saw him, she lit up. I think we've all seen kids that have that relationship with their parent.
I
right?
love little babies.
Like
though.
I've seen your granddaughter, the minute her mama walks in, she is like, she loves her mama, and she walk all around the house looking for her, you know, like that kid and she loves her daddy too. So I think we've all seen those kids just light up. And even people who didn't necessarily like Jason agreed that he was a good dad. Like he was a really great father to Cassidy. Michelle had asked her sister Meredith, who had recently finished college in New York, to move to Raleigh where she could serve as the baby's nanny. And this is so Michelle could go back to work. And Michelle enjoyed motherhood. She doted on every detail from the diaper changes to baths to breastfeeding. But the one thing that seemed to be missing from their lives was the perfect house. So after some serious house hunting, the couple decided on a home in the Enchanted Oaks neighborhood on Birchleaf Drive in Raleigh. The lots were large and wooded with privacy, and it was definitely the kind of neighborhood where you could raise a family. And if you've never been to Raleigh, North Carolina, or Cary, which is a huge suburb of Raleigh, it's full of these subdivisions. And they all have names like Enchanted Oaks, Royal Oaks.
Whispering Pines.
Yeah.
Huh.
When I was a nanny, I lived in Lockmere.
Ooh,
Yeah.
damn. That doesn't sound at all like a subdivision.
It was a 14-year-old colonial brick house that sat on nearly 2 acres of land. The couple easily put down a chunk of money and obtained a mortgage. So by July, they were homeowners moving into 5108 Birchleaf Drive. After buying the house, Michelle felt they needed to make more grown-up decisions. She suggested they get wills prepared in case anything were to happen. And because Jason's dad passed away when he was so young, she was concerned, like, we need to have everything in place. And she's one of those meticulous people and wants everything worked out. So she got a lawyer friend to help them. And Michelle thought it was more sensible to name Meredith as the child's guardian, as she's the one who spent the most time with Cassidy. But Jason felt, well, if something were to happen to me, you know, my sister Heather, she's already married, she's settled into a career, she's a homeowner, she's more stable, so maybe she would be the best choice because Meredith is young, doesn't really have a career, rents a place, you know, is like in her early 20s. So they couldn't really decide on who to name as a guardian. But they agreed, you know what, we'll just put this part on pause and we'll revisit this conversation in a couple years. But they did get the life insurance policies and they did get kind of like a will written out. Michelle continued to have a close relationship with her mother. They spoke every day. And since Linda was a teacher with summers off, she was able to spend every summer day with her grandchild. By spring of 2006, Michelle was pregnant again. This time, every detail had been planned. On Memorial Day weekend, they traveled to Brevard to share the news with Jason's parents. The couple were going to pick up some coffee before their road trip home, and they had left Cassidy behind with his parents. And as they were driving, Jason lost control of their Mitsubishi SUV, and they found themselves in the French Broad River.
Oh my gosh.
This is very scary. And there are parts of the French Broad that you don't joke around with. Like, could be very dangerous, right?
Well, a lot of it runs parallel to roadways, and there's a lot of riverfront, if you will, as it comes through Asheville. So there's more than one area where you could just drive right off into the river.
And it's a powerful
river. It is. It's a big, wide
river.
river.
Tons of people go like whitewater rafting, kayaking in this river, and there are parts that are very deep and
it's
fast
often,
rapids.
Oftentimes it's rather shallow, but it swells greatly in the least bit of rain because so many things run off into it as it goes through the Asheville area. So yeah. So they've wrecked into the French Broad.
And thankfully, their little girl wasn't in the car with them, but the vehicle started fast filling up with water. Michelle and Jason managed to climb out of the car, but they watched it as it went down to the bottom of the river. Can you imagine watching your car sink? Oh my gosh, horrifying. After the accident, Michelle knew something wasn't right. She went in for an ultrasound only to learn that the baby didn't have a heartbeat, and Michelle was devastated by this loss. As you can imagine, I think most people would be absolutely devastated by this kind of accident and losing a baby. A few months later, though, when Jason was out of town, she discovered she was pregnant again. Cassidy surprised her dad by wearing a t-shirt that said, "I'm going to be a big sister," and everyone seemed genuinely happy about the news. Though she loved her job at Progress Energy, Michelle decided to cut down her hours to part-time. She put together a 5-page presentation for her managers to explain why she should be granted this part-time status. She asked to work Tuesday through Thursday, and she would have her mother help babysit in the mornings, like during the summer, and she would also have Meredith to help out. Her managers agreed to let her fulfill this 3-day, 30-hour work week. Because they know, but I think it's funny, she put together this whole presentation, but they immediately were like, you're a bomb-ass employee, that's fine. Which is nice to have that flexibility. Now, as you could probably tell, Michelle's mother, Linda, she didn't really think much of her son-in-law, Jason. And I think anytime you have in-laws and they don't get along with your spouse, it can create such havoc.
It's so unhealthy. You just got to get over that. And I understand maybe they're not exactly who you thought your child would get with or whatever, and they're not your perfect image or whatever. But you have to let that go. And that's just, I try to stay out with my daughter, my oldest daughter. I try to stay out of her relationship. Even when there's times I just want to wade in, with whatever and make things better or right.
Whip out the dad card?
Or get but it's really worked for me to just let them do their thing within reason.
Well, and you
obviously.
Advice.
But yeah, I give advice.
And you try to steer her
right
in the right direction, but you are not totally hands-on. But I appreciate that because you're like, she's an adult.
Well, that's the thing. If you do show your ass and then they stay with this person, there's always going to be that tension between you, and it's just going to affect everyone, including the children.
This is a huge problem in Jason and Michelle's marriage, is the relationship between Linda and Jason.
So likely, I would think Linda would blame Jason for wrecking into the river and causing her daughter to have a miscarriage. Something unhealthy like that.
Well, she seems to blame Jason for everything. She thought he wasn't good enough for Michelle. She thought he was juvenile, irresponsible, sometimes crude. Linda thought he was incapable of making good decisions. She thought from the beginning he was a man who would break her daughter's heart. And Jason thought Linda was obnoxious. He thought she was, and I hate to say it, but it came from his mouth, a, quote, stereotypical Yankee. That he thought she was overbearing, a loud New Yorker who wasn't afraid to share her critical opinions of him. And, he's like Southern boy and was just like, oh, shut up.
So these are enough reasons for them to not like each other in the first place.
And she looked at him and thought he was kind of like a dumb redneck or something because he was country and from a small town. And so they just, everything. Like, they just did not get along.
Everyone throwing all these stereotypes around. That's not going to help you.
No. When Linda began spending more time at their new house, Jason was annoyed. He spent time working at home when he wasn't traveling. He did travel a lot for his job, and felt like when he was there working that Linda judged his every move. Linda felt he wasn't helping around the house enough, and he played in 2 softball leagues and 2 basketball leagues. Michelle had asked him to cut down on playing like one team sport because it was putting a lot of stress on her. However, Jason's goal was to be away from Linda as much as possible when she was in town. So he's like, fuck no, I'm going to sign up for more sports, because he's like doing anything he can to like not be in his house, which sucks. You have a house, you're paying a mortgage on it. You shouldn't feel like you want to avoid home.
No, but
because of a house guest.
That's selfish, though.
I totally agree.
To do all that, and you do travel for work, which you can't get around. And when you're home, you should. It's unfortunate that he doesn't want to be home with his family.
I agree. But I see both sides of it. I see that Michelle wants her mom there, and it's free babysitter, and her mom's getting to enjoy the grandbaby, so it's like helping them out. But then he's here, he's helping pay the mortgage on this house, and doesn't want to be here because he's got this like person he deems as an obnoxious, intrusive guest in his home. I mean, so there really should have been more compromise here.
Well, that's when it's on the daughter to say, look, we sit them 2 down in the room together and say, y'all need to get over this shit, because I don't want to live like this. This is creating unnecessary tension in our relationship. I mean, I would tell my mom or dad or whoever to fuck off if they want to openly be this negative towards the person I'm with. I'm sorry. I don't care what. And it sounds like circumstances maybe kept them in this situation. But I'm sorry. I don't need your help if this is the cost it's going to cost my relationship.
Well, again, boundaries.
Right.
And respect. And your parents have to respect your marriage, the sanctity of your marriage. And it may not be for them, but if it's working for you, they need to have some respect. And unless something is like really like terrible happening. I mean, it seems to me there's a big communication problem here. There's a big lack of respect on both sides, and they really needed to sit together and like hash this out. But this is I guess the part that I'm looking at, and I'm kind of like, and I guess maybe it makes me seem a little more sympathetic to Jason, but I don't know. The more he complained about his mother-in-law, the more Michelle would tell her mother and complain to her mom, who in turn hated Jason and seemed to look for more reasons to hate Jason.
That is such the wrong way to approach this.
And that's exactly what I think. And Michelle had a habit of calling her mom every time the couple got into a fight,
can't do that.
An argument. Jason begged her to stop doing this. Even Meredith said it put this extra strain on Jason and Linda's relationship because Linda was only hearing about the bad stuff when it came to Jason. She wasn't getting any of the good stuff. And Meredith, she's like acting as the nanny, so she's in the house pretty much all the time, and she's witnessing what's playing out. And even she said, like, Michelle's turning my mom against her husband. So again, like, not a good situation. Jason did have a close relationship with Michelle's dad, Alan. And if you remember, Michelle had issues with her dad and her stepmom. But Jason gets along great with him. The pair had been really good friends. Jason confided in Alan quite a bit. And though Michelle wasn't welcome, like, at her father's house, they loved Jason. And, like, if he was in town on business, he could pop by and see him. So he seemed to have a really good relationship with her dad. Jason desperately wanted a son. And he had seen, what it was like being the only boy in the family, and he kind of felt like it was his duty to pass on the family name because, his father died young. It was just on him. He had sisters. They married. So he felt like he needed to pass on this young family name. Michelle and Jason learned they would be having a boy, and they were thrilled, especially Jason. They chose the name Rylan, and Jason spent his time trying to find red outfits for the boy because he was like, no way am I dressing my kid in Carolina blue. And we all know it's pretty impossible to avoid baby blue when you're buying boys' clothes. So just to show what a diehard fan they are. And Jason's a little immature. There were a few incidents that followed, which proved to be questionable, Dylan. At one point, Jason had one of Michelle's friends, also named Michelle. So they would have friends come and stay all the time at their house, especially when they were playing like football games and tailgating. Friends would come in from out of town and crash at their place. So Michelle's friend, Michelle, had come into town, and Jason and Michelle number 2 spent a little too much time together at a weekend football retreat, which the couple hosted at their home. Jason seemed to pair off with Michelle, too, who was having marital problems. And the pair were seen multiple times sneaking off to spend time talking together. Then later, Jason went to a friend's bachelor party and lied, telling Michelle, like, there's only going to be guys there. But it ended up that there were women hanging out. And Jason ended up flirting with a female guest to the point that his friends felt they needed to separate them when it was bedtime.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is not good.
And yeah. So Michelle number 2, her real name is like Michelle Money, and she's from Florida. She was a former sorority sister. And she will later admit that Jason met her in Orlando in October of 2006 when he was on an alleged business trip, and they had sex. The pair kept in constant touch after September of 2006, which I guess had been the weekend of that football event, having sent a total of 980 texts to each other in this month period. Calls, emails, all exchanged in the month of October. So 980 texts, that's quite a bit to be sending to your wife's friend, don't you think?
Boy, that's 980 too many.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is just a bad situation. You have her having relationship issues, him, and it's just so disrespectful to hook up like this. You know what I mean? I know shit happens, and this is the very reason why the mother-in-law shouldn't be in their business 24/7 and all that, but it's still on him to not do that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Even though you have these things happening, it's just so wrong to cheat on someone
You're
like
an
that.
old horn dog
Yeah.
in retirement.
And you probably can't let it go.
So put that thing back in your
You know what I
pants.
mean? Some people just can't let the college and high school years go, and they can't grow up.
Well, it sounds like emotional cheating
It is emotional.
that turned into physical.
I think emotional cheating is worse almost than physical cheating.
I agree. Because there's an intimacy there.
There is an intimacy there. It's way, and well, all cheating's bad. I must say that. But I think there's different degrees of it. But you can never recover from any of it. If you cheat on that person, it will never be the same. Even if you stay together, it will never. Your relationship will never be forever changed, and always viewed through that lens of you cheated on them.
Of distrust.
Yeah.
On Saturday, October 21st of 2006, Jason picked up his old summer camp friend. Remember, he had this summer camp friend from way back.
Ain't this girl found her somebody else yet?
Her name's Carol Ann.
No.
She went to the light, is all I'm going to say.
Get away from the light, Carol Ann.
Right. Well, he picks her up from the airport in Raleigh. She was in town for a real estate training, and the Youngs had offered her a place to stay for a few days. So Michelle knew this woman was coming into town, and I reckon she knew the history of Jason and this person, but she agreed to let this woman stay at their house.
I'm going to guess she didn't know the extent of their relationship.
Well, at one point, Jason took Carol Ann's wedding ring and pretended to swallow the diamond, saying, "Oh, now you can't leave."
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
funny, Jason. I forgot to laugh.
Well, it turns out it was a big joke, but Michelle was upset with him. She was like, that was really inappropriate. You need to give her back her ring. What are you doing? You're a married man. She's a married woman. Act your fucking age, right? Well, Carol Ann Sowerby would also state later that during her visit to Raleigh, she and Jason had sex on his living room couch one night while Michelle had gone out of town.
Jason's gross. I'm sorry. This is really... It's gross.
Yeah, the same couch you're going to prop up your little girl to watch Peppa the Pig on?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's disgusting. I mean, only the step further you can go is in your marital bed.
Don't defile my marital bed with such acts of
he should have
perversion.
They should have hooked up on the linoleum in the kitchen like a damn human being where they could bleach it up later.
Why don't you take her out to the backseat of the car?
You go hook up with her at the edge of the property down by the culvert, okay? Show me some respect.
You go rent yourself a 1986 Chevy Cavalier. You do it in the back seat while you're parked at a 7-Eleven like the trashy people you are.
Playing Nickelback?
Yeah.
No, this is gross.
I have a photograph.
But it's obvious that Jason's very unhappy in his relationship.
Impulsive.
And
like very impulsive, not thinking of the bigger picture, consequences. Yeah. November 4th of 2006 was a big game. It's NC State versus Georgia Tech. Jason had invited his friend Brian Ambrose, along with his wife and kids, to stay at the Birchleaf house. Again, it seems like Jason and Michelle just kind of have this rotating guest list. And like during football season, basketball seasons, like every weekend they're hosting friends. Alan was scheduled, Alan, is Michelle's dad. He was scheduled to come in from New Jersey for the game. So he's going to come into town. Michelle had asked her sister Meredith to take care of Cassidy while she's finalizing all these game plans, prepping this big weekend. It was Friday, November 3rd, around 12:14 p.m. when Meredith got a call from Jason. Now, it was unusual for him to call her once a week, much less like consecutive days in a row. Meredith was accustomed to their rocky relationship, meaning Michelle and Jason, because over the past few months, she had kind of become their mediator with their marital problems and was like the communicator between the two of them. She would sit down with them, make them hash it out. And she was like a psychology major and wanted to get into counseling. So she was
wow.
So she's like trying to help them work through their problems.
So she's actually doing doing a damn thing.
Yeah. Well, so just 2 days before this, Wednesday, Michelle had phoned her sister to say she had had this fight with Jason and he had thrown a remote control at her. But Jason had called immediately back and left a message denying that he had done this. He was like, I absolutely did not. She's blowing the situation out of proportion. I know she's going to call your mom and tell her I threw a remote at her. Like, let your mom know I did not do this. Like, this is going to be an even bigger blow up than it needs to be. Meredith, like I said, had a degree in psychology, and though she was managing Lucky 32, which was a restaurant, she had hopes of getting her master's in marriage counseling. So like I said before, she had taken on a role as mediator between her sister and brother-in-law, and one of the main points of contention had been her mother, Linda. Michelle had wanted Linda to move into the couple's home, offering to finish a third-floor attic room, basically turn the third-floor attic into like an apartment space so the mother-in-law can move in full-time to nanny their children because she's retiring.
Okay.
Jason was not in agreement, and Linda even offered to pay for the renovation, and Jason's just like, no, this is the last thing I want is my mother-in-law who hates me to be in my house 24/7.
And I think this is the type of thing that leads him to do things like screw some girl on the couch. You're just
it's probably not the best avenue for recourse, in this situation.
Oh, I'm not saying he's right for it. He's dead wrong. But she's discounting his strong feelings. It's like saying, I know my mom treats you like this, but I don't care. This is what I want. And that's not good.
He also didn't want Linda staying at their house over the upcoming holidays. Thanksgiving's around the corner. He was like, can't she just get a motel room? She's only going to be here for a few days. And Michelle's like, I'm not going to make my mom go stay in a hotel room when we have a house she can stay in. I mean, so it's just constant back and forth. The couple also bickered about sex and romance. Jason would often ask his wife, do you want a hot beef injection? So again, Jason reminds me of you because you say disgusting things like that all the time.
I would not ever say those words in a sentence.
Not those words, but you say equally disgusting things.
Well, if I asked you if you wanted to be my cock garage for the evening, that's romantic.
You're disgusting.
No, what's crazier here is they're so far apart on this issue of the mother-in-law. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Jason can't even stand for her to come visit for a day or two, and Michelle wants her to move in full time. I mean, that's just worlds apart there, and that's a serious red flag in my book as far as what's happening in their relationship.
So they're bickering about romance. Jason's asking her gross things, probably like you, Dylan. Hey, you
A
wanna
beef
be-
injection.
You wanna cock rise? And she's trying to explain to him why this is disgusting, and it's the last thing in the world that would put her in the mood.
Hey, you want to be a judge at my salami competition later?
You want to be in a hot dog eating contest?
It's like the little mini weenies.
I mean, yeah.
It's cocktail sausages.
But when I say gross things to you, jokingly, you're like, oh, but you say shit like that to me all the time. But then you'll be like, what's wrong with you when I say something gross to you?
You don't say you save that for the private conversations. You say some of the grossest things to me, and the people out there don't know it. They don't realize
payback.
it.
I'm giving you a taste of your own medicine, Dylan. And it catches you off guard, and you see how, it's not romantic and it's offensive, isn't it?
Okay, enough of the unsavory comments about sexual innuendos, okay?
Jason wanted more sex, and Michelle wanted more romance. Women are
Again.
from Venus, men are from Mars, right? Isn't that what they say?
They're just opposite ends.
Well, during this conversation, Jason said, quote, all of this would go away if you just let me have a girl on the side. And Michelle rolled her eyes and said, quote, really, the whole discussion, and that's what you take away from it? So Meredith had spent 4 hours listening to this back and forth, and that's how it's concluding. And she's just like, what the fuck? Like, he's talking about, let me cheat, and instead of getting mad that he's saying this, she's just rolling her eyes like, oh, whatever. I mean, those are definitely red flags, right? Should be concerned.
Yeah, this relationship's definitely in trouble.
On November 2nd, Jason had called around 9 p.m. He called Meredith to say that he was on his way to Virginia for work. He had stopped in Greensboro to eat at a Cracker Barrel. And this is when he had insisted, I'd not tossed a remote at Michelle. She's blowing things out of proportion. Meredith thought about getting Michelle's take on what he had said, but instead she was like, I don't have time for this tonight. She's getting off work. It's late, and she's going to go have a nightcap with her friend at the Carolina Ale House, which was also one of my frequent spots. Great place to go watch a ball game. Anyway, on November 3rd, Jason's voicemail, he had called and left a voicemail for Meredith, and it had nothing to do with the previous conversation about the phone, the remote control being thrown, any of that. Instead, he asked Meredith for a favor. He explained to her that he needed her to go to their house and pull some eBay printouts off the second floor office printer. They were about Coach bags, and that Jason had been planning to buy Michelle a Coach bag for a gift, but had forgotten to take these printouts, and he had really wanted to surprise her. And he was afraid that she would be fumbling around in the office and see these printouts, and then she would know he was planning on buying her this nice handbag.
Okay. This doesn't seem suspicious at all.
Well, the message also said, another part of this story is that he's far west. He's driving to Virginia for work, right? And he wants her to get these eBay printouts. And he also goes on to explain, since he's driving so far west, he had planned to drive to his parents' house and spend the night and then come back in time for this game. But he had horrible reception. So just to let her know, if you try to reach me and you don't get me, I don't have good reception because I'm out in the mountains. And we all know we do struggle here with internet and Wi-Fi and cell phone reception.
It's true. Our coverage is lacking.
Especially back in 2006, bro.
Well, I was going to say, was this back in 1910?
Yeah.
With the printouts from the eBays and such?
Yeah, well, you got to keep in mind, this is 2006, bro.
Right.
He's probably got his MapQuest directions printed out, too.
Yeah, I know.
Actually, he does, and we'll talk about that. Meredith thought it was kind of an odd conversation. First off, he had mentioned this leather bag because, there's the list of what you should get for anniversaries. And the third wedding anniversary, you're supposed to give a gift of leather.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know you're never going to.
Well, I've never gotten this manual
Yeah, I know you're never going to give me
to
this shit.
anniversaries. Whoa. I give you my heart every year. And that is priceless.
Your penis is not your heart. Okay? So he'd mentioned this leather bag like 2 weeks before when his friend Carol Ann had been at the house. He'd mentioned it to Meredith, like, I'm going to buy her like a Coach bag or something. But their anniversary was like weeks past. And it seemed strange to Meredith that he was like focusing on getting this gift now when their wedding anniversary had been like a couple weeks ago.
Well, that is odd.
But she's just like, whatever, you know. Plus, it had taken him like 17 hours to remember he had forgotten these printouts. Because you got to keep in mind, like, he's gone, you know, he's been out of town and he's printed these out some days before and left them and whatever. So she's just kind of like, okay. The third wedding anniversary had not gone as Michelle had hoped. Maybe he was trying to make up for it, Dylan, because let me tell you what happened. Jason had been out of town with back-to-back business trips. First in Orlando, you know, where he's fucking her friend, then in Denver, Colorado. He sent a card from Florida with a $25 Starbucks gift card. Now, is that a good gift to give your wife for an anniversary present if you're out of town?
Yeah, what year is the $25 Starbucks card for?
I think that's once you've been married like 40 years
That's
and you just don't even care anymore.
Your 3-month anniversary,
yeah,
maybe?
Maybe that's like a Mother's Day gift or something. However, they were attending the wedding of a good friend the weekend of their anniversary, and Linda was coming into town to watch Cassidy. So on Thursday evening, October the 12th, Jason picked up Michelle from her office so they could have a romantic dinner at their favorite Italian restaurant. When he arrived, he was on the phone. Jason barely acknowledged his wife as she's getting into the vehicle. Then he spent the entire car ride on the phone and only got off when they arrived at the restaurant. And instead of having a lovely dinner, the Youngs got into an argument over the weekend travel plans. Jason had told Michelle he'd planned to ride to the wedding of his best friend with the guys. Again, always prioritizing the guys, right? They were going to golf while the women went to a bridal luncheon. Well, Michelle was angry. Jason explained that it made sense for him to go down early, ride with the guys, because they had an early tea time. And that if they rode together, he's going to go to this tea time, and then she's going to have to wait around for like some hours before this bridal lunch started. And, you know, she's going to be alone. She's probably going to be bored. Not a lot for her to do. And that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But Michelle saw it differently. She had hoped to spend the weekend together since he'd been away on their actual anniversary, and she kind of thought this could be like a romantic weekend getaway. It's a wedding. I mean, what's more romantic than a wedding? They've got a babysitter. They're out of town. So, you know, when you're out of town, you're in a hotel or an Airbnb, maybe you're a little more like uninhibited than you would be at home with your kids in the house.
Yeah, leave
right?
a little trace evidence in that room, baby.
Yeah. So she's like hoping they're going to spend this weekend together. Just totally get me off track.
Yeah.
Jason told her that his friend's wife had left her a voicemail inviting her to ride together. And Jason's like, I'm not giving up my golf plans because we've had this scheduled for weeks. And, you know, we've talked about this. You knew for weeks that we were going to golf. That was like sort of the bachelor party before the wedding kind of thing. It's like we're going on a kind of the last golf trip, probably going to get hammered out on the golf course, that kind of thing. So the pair ended up in this huge fight. Jason finally agreed to ride down with Michelle, and they would meet as friends at a gas station. Michelle would drop him off for the golf outing and spend the next couple of hours with her friend, who happened to be the bride. Jason was moody when he exited the vehicle and told Michelle, quote, "I'm done. I'm out." And as he drove away with his friends, he told them he was done with Michelle. He's like, I am so done with this relationship. I am so over this marriage. Well, Michelle is obviously upset. And she spent the rest of the day in what her friend described as kind of a despondent state. When her friend asked, you know, are you okay? Michelle said, well, I don't want to ruin the weekend for you. You're the bride. It's your wedding. And, you know, she wanted to be happy for her friend. So she just like wouldn't talk about it. But she's still kind of moping around. So I'm like, well, are you really being a good friend moping around? Can't you fake it till you make it kind of thing?
I bet the bride's like, oh my God, really?
Well,
you have to do this right now?
Yeah, well, nobody wants to deal with that. So she and Jason spent the weekend apart. Jason had a blast while Michelle was sad at their crumbling marriage. Jason would later say if his wife wanted to be miserable all weekend, that was her problem. He was going to enjoy being in the company of his college friends, having a good time. They'd spent a lot of money on this, this big event. And he's like, I'm going to try to enjoy every moment I'm there. And, I can get both sides of that. I mean, I know what it's like to be in a shitty relationship and be sad and unhappy. And you're at an event and you're trying to, pretend you're not miserable.
Let's be honest, though. With Jason, I feel like even if they had a great relationship, he's still going to be like, oh, my boys and my golfing, I got to do this.
He is. Again,
and so
you marry this guy.
Right.
And the thing that you might find cute and charming about him, once you're a couple years in and you're trying to grow up, he's still doing the same shit. And that gets old, right? You get to a point where it's like, grow the fuck up.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I get both sides of it. Because I get, not wanting to destroy a wedding, have fun, party, enjoy, try to make the best of it. But then I understand being, upset. And it's hard to get past those feelings, right?
The healthiest thing you could do out there is you two pack up in your car and go away and let these people do their thing. And y'all go handle your business away from them.
That's a good idea, Dylan.
To where you're not affecting your friends and their good time. Your time is the only one being affected. And you should go handle your fucking business. But instead, you got this.
It just seems like no one's handling the situation like they should.
No, and you got all these mutual friends and all this mess, and that just makes it so messy. Where you end up in these situations where people don't tell you the truth. They don't tell you what they really think because they're afraid of what the other one will say and all this mess. And so you're just creating this situation where people are just blowing smoke up your ass about the situations instead of being frank, brutally frank with you.
So we're back to, Meredith gets this phone call from Jason asking about the eBay printouts. But instead of going over there that night, going home, whatever, she waits until the following day. She wakes up, she works in a restaurant, so she works late hours. She had gone out and had a nightcap with her friends. So, the next day she sleeps in. Didn't get the message till noon, whatever. She goes over to the house at 1:15, pulls into the family driveway, 5108 Birchleaf. It was bright outside, but the brick pillars atop the driveway entrance were still lit, which was unusual. Usually they turn these off during the day. The backyard fence was open. The gate was open, which was concerning because Michelle had a dog, Mr. Garrison. They called him Mr. G. He was like a lab mix.
Mr. Garrison?
Mr. Garrison. So Mr. G, this lab mix, was usually outside in the fenced-in backyard, and the gate's open. So Michelle's like, Meredith's like, this is not good. Where's Mr. G? She realized she forgot her house key because she had given it to another friend who was going to feed the dog when they were out of town earlier and had forgotten to get her key back. But she said she could hear the dog whimpering inside the house. So she goes around to the back door, which is behind the garage. It's usually unlocked, but for whatever reason, it was locked. The door opener on the garage wasn't working either. So Meredith had to manually lift the garage door. And she was surprised to see her sister's silver Lexus parked in the garage. She was supposed to be at work. So Meredith's like, why is my sister's car here? Middle of the day. What's going on? She went into the unlocked kitchen door and saw Michelle's purse on the floor against a small desk. She called out for Michelle but got no answer. Meredith climbed the stairs and soon realized something was not right. She could see dark streaks on the bathroom floor, which was kind of to the right of the staircase. There was also hall carpeting, and it looked like there were some stains on the carpeting. Meredith stared at the stains until she realized they were tiny footprints. They were Cassidy's footprints. And she thought maybe Cassidy had gotten into some of Michelle's hair dye and had made a huge mess. And her first thought was oh no, Michelle's going to be really mad about this hair dye in her carpet. Now, as soon as she neared the master bedroom, Meredith saw more spots splattered across the wall and a huge red handprint soaked through a white comforter on the bed.
Oh my gosh.
By Jason's closet were red blood spots, and then she saw her sister face down in a pool of blood on the left side of the bed. She reached for the phone to call 911 when something began rustling under the comforter. Her niece appeared. Surprise! Pokes her little head up from under the blanket, unharmed, wearing pink pajama pants, no socks, no diaper or underwear. Aside from the stained feet, she was clean. Now, this is according to Meredith. Cassidy jumped up on Meredith's hip as the 911 dispatcher is answering the phone. Meredith begins to explain that she thought her sister was dead. She's laying in this pool of blood. She's cold to the touch. Cassidy is telling her aunt, she got boo-boos everywhere, talking about her mom. Meredith put the child in another room upon instruction from the dispatcher, who's like, please remove this baby from the crime scene, and return Michelle's lifeless, you need to go over to her lifeless body. By this point, it's stiff. The dispatcher's like, are you sure she's dead? Can you do CPR? Meredith's like, she's cold, she's stiff. She tried to turn her over, but couldn't. Meredith struggled to see if anything was out of place because there was just blood everywhere. But later she will note that the only thing she can find missing is her sister's engagement ring and her wedding band.
So rigor mortis has already set in, so she's been dead for some time already.
She tells the operator that Jason has traveled for work and is out of town. Meredith should be at work by now. Michelle should be at work by now. And Cassidy should be at daycare. And that it just happened to be a fluke that she came by the house. And though Cassidy was very young, she appeared to be trying to say that someone had been in the house. Meredith relayed that Michelle had been having marital problems with her husband, but it was nothing too serious. This is what she said on the 911 call. Then she realized her sister was 4 months pregnant. She remembered. And it made her feel like all the more sad that this situation has happened. When paramedics arrive at the house, they confirm that Michelle was deceased. Cassidy was checked out. Now, when they check out Cassidy, the paramedics, just making sure that she doesn't have any injuries or anything, because, clearly she's been in the house when this happened. They start to examine her. They find some dried blood on her toenails and kind of around the bottom of her pajama pants, but she had not sustained any physical injuries, and there was no blood on her feet. It looked like someone had washed the blood off this baby's feet.
Really?
Now, if you remember when Meredith called, she's like, she's got blood on her feet. They found no blood on this baby's foot. There were no signs of forced entry in the house. They examined, every inch of the house. They couldn't find any sign that anybody had broken in. There was nothing on the first floor that seemed disturbed or out of place. Only 2 small drops of blood were found downstairs. They were on the interior doorknob, which led from the kitchen out to the garage, and that would be determined to be Michelle's blood. Now, they did have blood in a lot of places upstairs, particularly in what they called Cassidy's bathroom. The toddler, there were toddler height, the little kid had stained on the walls, with hand, it was obvious hands, that was 2 feet tall. So they knew it had to be from this little girl.
Oh, it's that sticky line that toddlers leave behind themselves on the walls.
And there were tiny footprints. They found bloody socks belonging to the child in the bathroom along with a towel. And it will come out later that Cassidy couldn't put on her socks, and she really didn't take them off and put them on herself. So they kind of felt like maybe someone had helped take the socks off. We'll get to that. But Michelle had clearly been murdered in her own bed. There was blood on the linens that dripped down to the floor. There was an oval-shaped gouge in the wall on Michelle's side of the bed near Jason's closet. It appeared to be new, and there was a blood drop in it. But they never quite figured out what caused this gouge in the wall. She was lying face down, diagonally on the floor with her head near Jason's closet. Michelle was wearing black sweatpants and a hoodie, so she wasn't wearing pajamas. She had a pool of blood around her head, and a clump of her hair kind of rested between her head and the carpet. It was all, blood. I mean, this is just a horrible scene. Blood splatter seemed to show that she had been beaten when the closet door was closed, but at some point it had been opened because Cassidy's footprints were inside on the carpet. Her killer must have moved this body to open the closet, but for what reason? 2 adult-sized bloody shoe prints were found on a white pillow next to the footboard of the bed. 2 of 3 drawers from Michelle's jewelry box had been removed, and the only things missing that they could find were the engagement and wedding ring. There was no blood anywhere in the bathroom, not a trace, in the master bath. The only bloody footprints or fingerprints in the house seemed to belong to this child. Every bit of blood in the house was determined to be Michelle's. The eBay printouts were sitting on the printer, as Jason had explained in the voicemail. A garden hose was in the middle of a concrete path behind their deck in the backyard. It was running, water was trickling out, and there was like a patch of wet grass. But despite an extensive search of the property and the neighborhood, no murder weapon was found. Meredith then made phone calls to her mother, Linda, and to Jason's mother, Pat. Now, at the time, Jason was en route from Virginia to Brevard, allegedly. When Jason arrived in Brevard, his stepfather informed him of Michelle's death. Meredith was able to speak to him by phone and explained that Michelle had been murdered, that it was determined to be a homicide. The autopsy confirmed that the pregnant 29-year-old mother had died from blunt force trauma as she had been beaten repeatedly. She had defensive wounds where where she had been trying to fight these blows. So it was pretty obvious that she had given up a pretty good struggle. She had lacerations on her skull deep enough to expose the bone. In total, about 20 separate blunt force injuries were found. The attacker's weapon was some kind of heavy, blunt object with a rounded surface. She had hemorrhaging in the brain, missing teeth, and a jawbone had clearly broken through the skin.
Jeez.
So this is a fucking rage attack, it seems like.
Brutal.
She had also been strangled, as there was damage to the thyroid gland and neck tissue. No single scratch or bruise was detected below her neck. She was also fully clothed, and no sexual assault had occurred. It was impossible for the medical examiner to determine the exact time of death, which is going to kind of bring questions later, be a problem. Within some seconds of Jason's arrival in Raleigh, because as soon as he learns this, his mom, stepdad, they all jump in the car and drive to Raleigh.
Back from Brevard?
Yes.
So they got about a 4.5-hour ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With this horrible news to process. So within seconds of his arrival back in Raleigh at the house, investigators seize his Ford Explorer. They expected it to be chock full of clues, but it wasn't. Not a single drop of blood was found inside the vehicle, even when they used the phenolphthalein. I think that's what it's called. That spray.
Luminol.
Yeah, basically.
Known as luminol.
Right. So nothing was found in the car or in any of Jason's luggage. Jason had a MapQuest direction printout.
Damn it, Jason.
2006. A map from Virginia to North Carolina. He had a few gas receipts and a receipt from the Hampton Inn in Hillsville, Virginia, where he had been staying. Now, investigators arrived on November 4th at the Hillsville Hampton Inn. Jason's alibi was the hotel, because he's saying, I went out of town for work, checked in this hotel,
I was there all evening.
The whole time. Now, it is 169 miles from his house in Raleigh to this hotel. His cell phone records pinged at Wyattville at 7:30 a.m. on November the 3rd. So he went out of town the 2nd. November 3rd, he has a business meeting. Cell phone record pings at this tower near his meeting, right? On November 3rd. Based on the distance, it would have taken Jason at least 6 hours to drive to Raleigh, commit the murder, then return to the Virginia motel. Just long enough to pick up a receipt from the hotel and a newspaper that was, one of the hotel newspapers, and then drive to Wyattville, which was about 27 miles away. Room 421 was scoured, but turned up no evidence, no blood. Though it had been cleaned, from a maid, they still didn't find anything in there. Like, nothing.
So the investigators have not wasted any time on
jumping on
suspecting
Jason as the suspect.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Just immediately, even whatever evidence they don't have tunnel vision.
Right. Which can be detrimental to the investigation.
From the get-go. Exactly. Now, Jason first appeared on the motel security tape around 10:49 to 10:51 p.m. on November 2nd. He entered the room at 10:56 p.m. using an electronic key card. Because when you swipe those electronic cards, it keeps a digital record.
Right.
Right? So they're saying, okay, he went in his room at 10:56 using this key card. It was the only time the key card was used to unlock that door. He appeared at 11:59 at the front desk, and he's wearing a different shirt than in the first video, like he's changed into a t-shirt or something. Then another camera captures him heading to the western end of the hotel's exit near a stairwell. That gave him a little over. So they're trying to say if he's appearing at midnight, basically on this camera, and then he's pinging this cell phone in Whiteville, Virginia, that leaves a 7.5 hour window that Jason could have returned to Raleigh, killed Michelle, and then driven back to Virginia.
Just enough time.
And they're saying it's about a 6 hour trip, round trip, and he has 7.5 hours to pull this off. So detectives consider this a very possible timeline.
Well, yeah, it sounds very doable because that leaves just over an hour and a half for the actual crime itself. Which I'm no expert, but I can't think you need more than about 10 or 15 minutes to beat someone to death. But I mean, this is so callous that if you could do that, drive 3 hours with intention of killing your wife, go in there, kill her, leave your daughter there with her murdered mother, and your daughter doesn't recognize you, know that's dad, to where she could, tell that to someone. I mean, it seems like a lot, but I don't know the rest of the story.
Well, let's get to it. Around 5 a.m., an employee found a small red rock had been used to prop open the western emergency exit near the stairwell.
Uh-oh.
The guests needed key cards between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. to get in and out of the hotel. So someone propping this door open would, of course, leave that door unlocked, so they would be able to get in and out without swiping the key card. So, questionable. If Jason had wanted to keep from using the card, the best choice would have been propping open this door.
All you gotta do is duct tape the lock, bro. The latch. It's how, it's used to infiltrate places. You go during the day, duct tape the latch where it doesn't engage.
Tips.
And then later on, you just slip in and out and you remove the tape. You know that very thing is what got the Watergate burglars busted. A security guard, a young gentleman, found a door that was done like this, and it raised his suspicion.
And he was like a new employee.
It was a young black security guard, and he was raised suspicion, and everyone else is just like, yeah, whatever. It was probably maintenance guys or something. He wouldn't let it go, and he ended up stumbling upon the burglars.
Hero. Okay, so the security camera in that same exit stairwell area vicinity had been unplugged at some point. About 20 minutes after Jason entered his room at 11:20 p.m., the camera was unplugged. So sometime after he had gone from the desk back to his room, that camera was unplugged. And then around 5:50 a.m., a hotel employee noticed, like the next morning,
the camera's unplugged
and plugged it back in. And this is around 5:50 a.m. Now, less than an hour later, that camera was tampered with a second time. Between 5:50 and 6:34 a.m., it was functioning properly. Then at 6:35 a.m., someone had pushed the camera, like moved it so that the camera was capturing the ceiling only.
So he pushed it up off the doorway.
Yeah. Someone had shoved this camera up. An employee repositioned the camera, and then it worked fine after that. If Jason had returned at 6:35 a.m., he would have been able to walk in without using the key card. He could have pushed the camera toward the ceiling and went into his room. And they found out that room could close without locking the door.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You can leave it to where you can go in and out.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So, you would say this is circumstantial, but that's weird shit, Door propped open, camera tampered with on the same doorway. This just doesn't look good for Jason.
Well, it doesn't, but I'm also thinking about, Dylan, how many times have you been to a hotel and you've seen a door propped open? Because I know that I've seen that multiple times, especially when you're staying at, this is like a, Hampton Inn?
Right.
You're staying at like a, Holiday Inn or something. Like not exactly a 5-star hotel. Maybe like a little roadside hotel.
It's a motel.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen doors propped open like that before.
Yeah, but what are the odds that the door and the camera are tampered with at this hotel where you're staying, and then the camera was tampered with the second time right in that window that investigators would think he would be operating in to drive there and back. Right there at that 6:30
Look, I
to
get
7 o'clock.
I get it.
So I would think
But
that.
when we get through our story and you see that basically that's all they have,
Oh, really?
there's nothing else.
So they took instant custody of his vehicle before they even let him know what was going on. So they figured they'd get the jump on him. Nothing found there.
Nothing.
They scour the room, his hotel room. So he's went and violently beat his wife to death. But there's no trace evidence transferred to his vehicle. There's no trace evidence brought back to his room. Now this starts to raise some questions.
Okay. But wait, there's more. Also, I want to say, I'm sorry we're giving you such a lengthy episode today, but it's been a while. We need to get back to it. Now, if he made the trip to Raleigh, Dillon, there would have been time to kill Michelle and return before the early meeting in Wyattville. However, this theory posed several problems. First, the math and the fuel didn't add up. The first receipt found in Jason's Explorer was from a gas station near downtown Raleigh. It was dated 7:32 p.m. on November 2nd, moments after he left his wife and daughter so he could go out of town on this business trip. The second gas receipt was from a station located in Duffield, Virginia at 12:06 p.m. on November 3rd. Investigators found no evidence of fuel purchases other than those two times. Yet there was no way that a 22.5-gallon fuel tank in a Ford Explorer would have gone 532 miles. So if the theory was correct that he'd killed Michelle, investigators were going to have to prove that they had to find a gas station somewhere between Raleigh and Hillsville, Virginia, where he had refueled between 4 and 6 a.m. on November 3rd and paid cash.
Okay. That's a tall order.
Yeah. By November 6th, Monday, they are scouring every gas station along the route. Investigators. Finally, they found a BP station along Highway 52 in King, North Carolina, where a woman named Gracie Doms Bailey was working. She was on duty during the early morning hours of November 3rd, and she remembered a white male in his 30s paying for gas with cash. She said he was driving a white SUV, and the man had been rude to her because the pump wasn't working. And so she vividly remembered this man, like, cussing her out, throwing cash at her, being an asshole.
Can't people ever remember not to be shitty to people when you're committing a crime and trying to fly under the radar? Because I was like, okay, when you said that, I was like, how in the hell does this woman remember this nondescript, one guy in the middle of the night? But there you go. There's your answer. Because he was an asshole. And she remembers that.
But does she? Because we know how these eyewitness
she thinks
people
she remembers that.
Are often mistaken. So between 4 and 6 a.m., she remembers it's a white guy. He's in his 30s. He was driving a white SUV. That describes a large chunk of people.
Right.
So.
Right. And everyone who's been exonerated for wrongful conviction, typically it was eyewitness testimony that sent them away in the first place. So, yeah, there is an issue.
It's not hard proof. And I know circumstantial evidence is evidence, but just as far as physical proof, again, it's circumstantial.
They were almost guaranteed to find someone willing to say they remember him by going to all these different gas stations. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like someone's going to be like, oh, yeah, I think, yeah. Oh, and then the more they talk about, oh, yeah, wait a minute, I'm sure. Now I'm sure that, yeah.
Well, because we know that a lot of people want to, even if they're not doing it out of like any kind of spite, they want to be helpful and they want to be like part of something, like something kind of big, so to be part of a murder and like, oh, I saw him.
Okay, so they found their refueling. Now they feel like this is all they needed.
Yep. So a witness named Terry Tiller told police she was delivering newspapers. And so a light-colored SUV parked either in the yard at Michelle's house or on the street in front of the house on November 3rd. And this was in the early morning hours. Another woman named Cynthia Beaver saw a light-colored, what she described as a soccer mom car, at 5:20 a.m. at the edge of the driveway of the Young's house. She saw a white male in the driver's seat and a woman in the passenger seat.
Okay.
Faye Hensley, another eyewitness, claimed to see an empty SUV at the edge of the Youngs' driveway as late as 6:20 a.m. Now, Jason's movements on that November 2nd is, again, he left home, stopped off in Greensboro at 9:25 to eat at a Cracker Barrel, calls Meredith, leaves a message, checks into the Hampton Inn at 10:54 p.m., never uses his card after 10:56. The hotel couldn't confirm what time he left because he used express checkout, which is basically you just leave. He called his mother, Pat, at 7:40 a.m., and that's when that cell tower pinged near Whiteville, Virginia, and he arrived at the cell's call in Clinton, Virginia, 30 minutes late, which he will say he got lost getting there.
Now, I must say that one witness saw the light-colored SUV at the end of the drive around 6:30 a.m. That would be impossible for him to get back in time for his meeting.
Okay, we're going to get into more of this.
Oh, wow.
I have more to talk about.
Okay, Lord.
I know it's a very lengthy case. I have so much good information about it. Police were convinced that Jason had tampered with the surveillance footage. Sometime after midnight, he had left the hotel, drove to Raleigh, killed his wife, then returned to Virginia. A search of the Youngs' computer revealed that someone had searched, quote, anatomy of a knockout, head trauma blackout, head blow blackout, and head trauma at some point, but they couldn't pinpoint like the exact time or date, just that was somewhere in the search history, which is weird to me because I thought you could come up with an exact search.
Well, it seems like it would give you a metadata that tells you exactly when and where it was searched.
Yeah, right?
I would assume, but maybe in 2006 that wasn't as accurate.
I don't know, maybe.
Possibly. It certainly sounds like the forensics side of the investigators wasn't as good as it is nowadays.
Now, it took 2 years for an arrest to come. Finally, Jason Young was charged with first-degree murder, and he pleaded not guilty 2 years after Michelle had been murdered. In the meantime, Jason moved back to Brevard to be near his parents, along with his daughter Cassidy. Linda hired a lawyer to secure some kind of visitation rights because she said that Jason was difficult. Like, he didn't want her to see her granddaughter, and they would meet halfway, and it was just like a big thing.
Why would you be surprised that this person you had this horrible relationship with doesn't want to interact with you now? I mean, I would just be like, well, okay, I understand why.
And after much haggling and back and forth fighting and legal battle, Jason finally gave custody of Cassidy to Meredith, to Michelle's sister, as he's facing trial. The prosecution's case hinged on the fact that Jason and Michelle were having marital problems and financial issues, and that Jason no longer wanted to be married to Michelle. Jason had been unfaithful to Michelle during their marriage, so that was another piece of circumstantial evidence, which they said pointed to guilt. It was their case that after he checked into that hotel in Virginia, he left during the night, drove to Raleigh, murdered his wife. They said he stopped off for gas between Hillsville and Raleigh, and that he'd been the one who messed with these 2 surveillance cameras. The prosecution painted a horrific picture of a young mother strangled and beaten to death in her bedroom while her toddler Cassidy was left alone in the house with her mother's body for hours. Her small bloody footprints were tracked all over the upstairs. The jury was shown surveillance footage from the Hampton Inn. A hotel employee testified that the camera had been unplugged, then someone pointed it toward the ceiling early in the morning after he had replugged the camera up. It was a very tight timeline, but possible, according to prosecutors. Meredith Fisher testified about her sister's marriage and how she'd encouraged her sister to leave Jason, but Michelle had made no effort to separate or divorce him. The court was told that 3 weeks before Michelle's death, Jason had told a friend he was done and contemplating divorce. The court heard that Jason disliked his mother-in-law, Linda. The pair didn't get along. Linda visited Michelle for long periods of time, and that Michelle had suggested they renovate the house for Linda to move in, and that Jason had, as we know, not been very fond of that idea. When Meredith phoned Linda to say Michelle was dead, Linda called Jason but said she got no answer and that he never ever returned the call to speak to her about, like, one-on-one about Michelle's death.
Okay.
Linda testified about her daughter's sex life, saying that Michelle was unhappy, that Jason was not romantic, and that he was perverted about sex. He had female friends who stayed over at their house on more than one occasion. FBI and SBI agents reviewed 2 sets of footprints or shoe prints that were found on pillows near Michelle's head. One they determined was a size 12 and that it was either a Hush Puppy, Orbital, Sealy, or Belleville shoe. Had to be one of those brands. And the other shoe was a size 10 Airlift or a Franklin athletic shoe.
Okay, so 2 different sets of shoes they have determined was present.
2 sets of shoes. Yet there was no physical evidence that Jason had ever, or there was no evidence that he'd ever been like physically violent toward his wife. And there was no physical evidence in this case. His ex-fiance testified that years before, Jason had been drunk at a wedding and that the pair had had an argument and that he had forcefully removed a ring from her finger. Remember they were engaged? Apparently he like yanked the ring off her finger. That he also one time was drunk and punched a wall in their apartment and broke out her car windshield with his hand during a fight. But from what I gathered, there was no like record of this. This is just her, like this is her retelling the story, but I don't think there were any police records about these incidents.
Well, I think
And I'm not saying that you can't believe her, but I'm just saying, years later, somebody comes out of the woodwork and says, oh, yeah, by the way, he punched a wall 20 years ago. I mean, do we believe? I don't know.
Well, I think this could be said about any of us. In our entire life, my 44 years, there's instances that could be brought up to make me look bad.
Oh, definitely.
I think that's
we
true.
all have something.
Yeah,
in
that's
our
true.
past.
Yeah, it's true for all of us.
And if somebody wanted to paint you in a terrible light, I'm sure we all have skeletons people could pull out and make you look like the biggest shitbag in the world. But again, it's circumstantial.
Well, you got the hat trick here. You got adultery. Okay, that they're not going to view that. The only thing that's missing is a sadistic porn to be rolled out on the stand. And you got adultery. You got
or Michael Peterson, like he was bisexual.
Mm-hmm.
There was gay porn on his computer.
And all as soon as they said gay porn, of course, I think he killed his wife. But as soon as they said gay porn, he was done with that jury. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And that's the problem with the jury system. As I see it, it can be tainted so easily. They can just as soon as you get an unfavorable view of that defendant, you're a lot more likely to go with a guilty verdict, right? And so Jason hates his mom and mother-in-law, even though she may deserve it, for all we know. He's a cheater. He didn't love his wife, blah, this and that. And I could just see how it just kind of keeps stacking up.
Genevieve, the ex-fiance, also testified that she hadn't had contact with Jason for years, but in September of 2006, he had sent her an email saying he loved her. Jason's defense attorney said, though he may have not been the ideal husband, that didn't make him a killer. There was no credible evidence against their client. No physical evidence, no DNA, no fingerprints, nothing. Not at the crime scene, his car, or at the hotel. Jason was immediately, reprimanded by detectives when he got back. I don't know if reprimand's the right word. He was basically, taken in by detectives the minute he got to Raleigh. They took his vehicle and they did a physical exam. He had no cuts, no bruises, no injuries to his hands or body aside from a bruised, broken toenail when he was examined by police, which, I think he explained that he had some kind of sports injury because, he played all those sports. Jason took the stand and testified that he loved Michelle and was excited about the birth of their son. Jason and Michelle had exchanged emails on October 24th, 2006, where Jason had consented to counseling sessions with Michelle and expressed in the emails that he was dedicated to making their marriage work. So there's that. And Jason said, though they did argue at times, it was not more than most couples. His attorneys argued there was no way that Jason had enough time to pull off this murder, driving 169 miles twice, totaling over 500 miles. Jason had only recently started a new job selling electronic health record software, and he was in Virginia setting up the sales call. And because he had gotten there kind of late at night and he needed to be up early for this meeting, he had opted, he was going to drive in, spend the night. That was the whole purpose of being out of town that night. And, also they pointed to the fact that this is a new job and you're not going to risk driving 500 and something miles in the middle of the night, getting zero sleep, killing your wife, and then go into a sales meeting on a brand new job where you're trying to land a client with no sleep.
Well, I guess the reasoning there would be if you're going to murder your wife, you're not making responsible decisions, and maybe you would put the job on the line to do that. But one problem I have is 169 miles times 2 is not over 500 miles.
Both, honey, you got to think about
Well,
round
I'm
trips.
saying that's like 300 and shit. I don't know.
No, from Raleigh to Virginia, 169 miles, right? Then he returns back to Raleigh, 169 miles, and then returns. Yeah, the math adds up, bro.
But like 150 and 150 is 300. And then plus 19 twice.
I mean, it's like 500 something miles. Are you stupid?
That's not, is that right?
I'm doing it on my phone.
Oh, wow. I thought I had you. That shows what I know about math.
Yeah,
So-
it's over 500 miles.
So his attorneys are like, there's no way. It's not enough time. And then arrive at this meeting not disheveled, all amped up, weird. And you go in the meeting, you're perfectly fine. No one notices anything. Is that
You
right?
don't look sleepy. You don't look
Right.
worn out. You're on,
Okay.
you're on your game. Now, after he checked in the motel, Jason said he decided to review the demonstration software again so he would be prepared for this morning meeting because, again, new job. He just wants to make sure he's got it down, professional, can give a presentation. That at one point he left his room to get a laptop charger from the car, and that's when he realized he had forgotten his key card. So that's when he propped open that door to go out to the parking lot. He said he went back to his room, then left again later to smoke a cigar. But first, he stopped by the desk, got a copy of USA Today. Then he went back out that propped exit door and smoked a cigar, like right outside the building. Jason claimed the internet searches were conducted months before, and because he had witnessed an accident and was looking up, like, if somebody gets knocked out, how long are they out? But that it, who knows? The jury couldn't reach a verdict, so it was an 8-4 acquittal. Hung jury. Jason faced a second trial. Now, he didn't testify, but a video of the first trial's testimony was played for the jury at the second trial. After 6 hours, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. The judge said, quote, "Fingerprints of domestic violence were all over this case."
Okay.
Jason appealed his conviction. But here's the problem, Dylan. Linda had filed a civil lawsuit for wrongful death, and Jason had not responded. So the judge had allowed the jury to hear this at the second trial, and Jason's attorneys at the time had not objected when the judge allowed the jurors to hear about the lawsuit. The same judge also heard both cases. Judge Donald Stevens, they argued, had poisoned the jury against Jason because during the second trial, he is allowing information from the civil lawsuit, which we all know, we saw from the OJ trial, we've seen from a lot of trials, you can be found not guilty of murder, but the civil lawsuit, they're much quicker to award you financial settlements.
Yeah, but the bar, as far as evidence and everything goes, a lot lower in the civil lawsuit.
Exactly.
So that's completely inappropriate for that to be introduced into the criminal trial.
Well,
and I can't believe that his lawyers did not object to that.
Well, a court of appeals agreed. His conviction was vacated, and he was allowed a new trial. But before the third trial could take place, a state court of appeals panel reversed the court of appeals decision.
Aha!
His conviction for first-degree murder remained. Michelle's family was awarded $15.5 million in the civil wrongful death lawsuit, but Jason is currently incarcerated in a North Carolina state prison. So it doesn't seem like they're going to get a whole lot of money out of him. Okay. In the book, we got to talk about this, Dylan. Absence of evidence, author Lynn Blanchard suggests that Jason was innocent and posed a new theory.
Well, see, that's what I can't stop thinking about. If not Jason, then who and why? Right? Because this does seem like a rage-filled murder. It does not seem like a bumbling burglar who, is surprised by the homeowner and, beats them to death and then runs off. because there's no evidence of any kind of forced entry into the house or anything missing. So then if Jason didn't do it, then who did it?
So in the book, Absence of Evidence, author Lynn Blanchard suggests that Jason was innocent, poses this new theory that the person responsible for Michelle's murder was her younger sister, Meredith.
Whoa.
Yeah. So let's get to why she has some of these theories. And there's so much that this could have been like a damn 8-hour podcast. Like we could do a whole series on this murder. So my suggestion, if you want to know more about this theory, you got to read this book. You can get it on Kindle and it's part of the Unlimited. So if you have Kindle, you can read it for free. There you go. Kindle plug. According to Blanchard, Meredith had always been jealous of her sister Michelle. Meredith struggled with her weight and started taking substances. According to police interviews, Meredith was suspected of being involved in drugs on and off. Even into adulthood, there were conflicts in the sibling relationship because Michelle often told Meredith what to do and was kind of bossy, and Meredith bucked Michelle's advice. And they had this back and forth sibling rivalry. And it's been reported that Meredith was jealous of her sister because she deemed her sister as like the pretty, older, thin, perfect, charm, like everything just fell into her lap. She had a charmed life. So she was jealous. When Meredith was in high school, another weird thing, Dylan, in Sayville, there was a strange murder that she was, I guess, kind of not associated with, but kinda. A 17-year-old co-cheerleader on Meredith's squad was murdered by her mother and sister, who made it look like an accident. And when the prosecution put this case together, they theorized it was part of a Santeria sacrifice that the mother and sister had made. Yeah. So this was like someone who was on her cheer team, friend. And so that was kind of pointed out that she's already experienced, in a roundabout way, someone close to her being murdered. I don't know what that really says, but the author is pointing to that. But here's where it gets weird, though. One of the paramedics who examined Cassidy said the child was surprisingly calm and found no visible blood on her, despite evidence that she had tracked blood up and down the hallway and had smeared it on the walls. So someone had taken the time to clean this child up. He suspected this, and he told the assistant district attorney, a woman named Becky Holt, that he believed Meredith had done so. Meredith made phone calls following the arrival of paramedics, including to her mom, Linda. Now get this. Linda was getting her hair done. So instead of sharing the news or saying like, Mom, it's an emergency, like I have to tell you what's happened, she let her mom hang up without even mentioning what had happened to Michelle.
That's weird.
And like waited until her mom finished getting her hair done and called her back to tell her that her daughter was dead.
Wow, what an interesting theory, because you did have the two sets as determined by the FBI, was
One
it?
of the witnesses said
two sets of
saw a
shoes.
male in a light-colored SUV with a woman, and I'm going to tell you more about that as I get into this theory.
But she's also the one who was like, "Oh, Jason wanted me to go back to get the eBay whatever Coach bag thing off the printer."
At a point to tell the dispatcher, "It's a fluke. I'm here."
That is odd, and she didn't sound even particularly all to hell when she reported that she's finding her sister bludgeoned to death in this horrible scene.
Okay, let's get into this some more, Dylan.
Holy cow.
We're going to dive further into this theory. A deputy with the Wake County Sheriff's Office noted that Meredith had a very calm demeanor, which we all know people handle grief and shock very differently in these situations, so I'm not going to begrudge her demeanor, right? But he said she only seemed to turn on the waterworks when a detective arrived on the scene and started questioning her. And then it was like she turned it on and off, according to who she was talking to. She told the deputy she had not cleaned up Cassidy, though he thought this was odd because there was no blood on the toddler. You got all these bloody footprints, and the 911 call, she had said that this child was covered in blood. So again, he's like, what you said on the call doesn't match up with what's going on. Which people, when you're in that panic state, maybe you are misreporting information.
Right.
But he thought it was odd that someone had taken the time to clean up this child. Meredith was using a headset from the house phone because her cell phone was in the car. This is what she was saying. So she's got the house phone making calls outside the crime scene. And now everything's part of the crime scene that's by the house, including her car. So she's like, I don't have my cell phone, and she has to call from the house phone. Yet her cell phone records, when those were pulled later, show that she was using her cell phone all during that time. And the deputy was wondering, like, did she lie? And why did she lie? Because she kept saying she didn't have her cell phone the whole time, but there's obviously calls to and from the cell phone to, like, her friend, her roommate, her boyfriend.
Well, yeah, if I was the investigator on scene, I'd be like, you give me that. You'll have to find another way to communicate right now. You can't be using this house phone. This is all evidence now. We don't want your calls you're making now to muddy up the waters of the records.
Several people saw Cassidy with socks on her feet, like when they first arrived. The paramedics and stuff were like, we saw her with socks on, but they were later gone. So it would indicate that someone had cleaned her up, they'd put socks on her, and remember there was a bloody pair of socks found in the bathroom, and it was reported by everybody that, like, Cassidy didn't pull her socks off by herself and she didn't put socks on herself. Like, she basically didn't dress herself at all. She was too young. And they thought it was odd because they're like, this isn't a kid who could... She may have pulled those bloody socks off, but she's not going to go get a clean pair and put them on her clean feet.
And clean her feet up.
Yeah. Yet a neighbor noted that when Meredith... so after all of this happened and the cops are there and the paramedics and it's just chaos, at some point Meredith had gone over to a neighbor's house with Cassidy so that they could use the bathroom and get, like, some water and stuff. And of course the neighbors were like, please, come in, we'll help whatever you need. And the husband, the man of the house, had noticed that this little child didn't have on socks, and it's cold, it's November, and he's like, it was really cold outside, she didn't have on a coat, no socks on her feet. And he was like, my first thought is, like, this baby needs some socks. And he went upstairs and grabbed a pair of his teenage daughter's socks, and he was like, I knew they wouldn't fit a little kid, but my thought was, it's better than nothing. So he put these socks on this little girl. So a detective ends up driving Meredith and Cassidy to Target for clean clothes after finding Michelle. And at that point, the baby was wearing socks that fit her. So at some point,
what the hell,
again,
dude?
Meredith had taken these adult socks off her and put these clean socks back on her.
His lawyers didn't bring any of this up?
Even if they did, it doesn't seem like it made a difference.
So a lot of inconsistencies there. Very strange things there with the socks.
So again, Meredith said this child had bare feet. There was proof of the footprints, all of that. But when EMS arrived, they noted her feet were clean. She even had socks on at the time. Shelly Shad, who was Michelle's friend, had been at the house the night before the murder, the night that Jason had gone out of town, which I believe was a Thursday the 2nd. And she described, before she left the house, that Cassidy was wearing, like, a pink t-shirt. And I guess Michelle was going to put her jammies on. And this pink t-shirt was missing. And Meredith would later say that she had taken it home. So I guess the situation was this pink t-shirt was missing. And they think maybe Cassidy had it on under her pajamas. And so when they go to Target, she hands the police the bag of pajamas, the t-shirt, or the top and the bottom, and the bottom have bloodstains, and the socks she was wearing, but didn't hand over this pink t-shirt. So there was no way of knowing whether or not she was wearing it under the PJ top. And then, like, some days later, Meredith will hand it over to police and be like, oh, I forgot to give this to you. I took it home and washed it.
Okay.
Which could have had some DNA, some evidence on it. Meredith mentioned immediately that the couple had life insurance policies and suggested that Jason had an online gambling problem, though there was no evidence that Jason ever, did online gambling.
She's saying a lot, man.
She described Jason's car accident and suggested that he had done it on purpose, like running the vehicle off the road into the river in hopes of trying to kill Michelle and their unborn child.
Okay. Seems like an extreme way to attempt that.
Planned it. At the funeral, Meredith asked Michelle's friends if they thought Jason did it, and they all were like, no. No, we don't think he did it. And they noted that as soon as they were like, no, she would walk away and stop talking to them. And they thought that was strange. Linda and Meredith didn't reserve a family seat for Alan, her father, at the funeral service. So, they typically have a section for family. They didn't save a seat for him. And he was told that his wife couldn't come to the funeral at all.
Okay.
And Jason was like, he spoke to Alan and was like, look, because of the conflict, maybe it's best your wife doesn't come. But it wasn't like Jason saying it. He was just trying to smooth things over because Michelle and Linda, or Meredith and Linda, didn't want him there, or his wife there. Though the murder weapon was never found, a private investigator that was hired, I believe, by the Young family, a guy named Dr. Maurice Godwin, thought maybe the murder weapon was an iron. There was a blood swipe on a sheet that appeared to be from an iron, like a stain. And the police didn't take the iron into evidence, but Dr. Godwin took photos of the iron and like the blood smears. And I have a photo and I'll share it on Instagram because it does indeed look like an iron. Though the investigators said nothing was missing from the house, it was obvious to Dr. Godwin that all the upstairs closets had been rummaged through and were in disarray. An SBI agent believed it had taken Michelle a long time, like an hour to die, that if someone had wanted to steal from their house, they would have had plenty of time. So Dr. Godwin's like, yeah, so that makes sense. They would have had time to rummage through all the closets. All the stuff's in disarray, like they were looking for something specific.
Dude, that iron could have made that grooved hole.
Exactly.
In the wall.
Tip of the
The
iron.
tip of
and
the
if it
iron.
had blood on the tip and hit the wall, it totally could have. Makes sense, right? So one of the footprints was a size 10. If you remember, they found the shoe prints. And Jason wore a size 12, which one was a size 12, but it was like an orthopedic shoe. And he didn't own that brand. He didn't own Hush Puppies or Sealy or
Hush Puppies.
Orbitals or whatever brand.
What grown man's going to wear a pair of Hush Puppies?
My dad.
Are those like dock shoes or something?
I think so, but I think
They're like loafers,
but the kind
right?
of shoe they were describing sounded like an orthopedic type of shoe.
Okay.
Something that you maybe would expect like an older person to wear. I don't know, but maybe Jason got the damn gout. I have no idea. Jason's wallet, which had $500 cash, had been left behind at the house, and it was missing and never recovered. So someone had taken his wallet that he claimed had cash in it.
Okay.
And the wallet was gone. Also, the dog was inside the house. Remember Mr. G, the lab mix? So when Meredith says she arrives at the house, the gate's open, the dog's inside the house. But there was no sign that the dog had trampled through the blood.
Yeah.
So they were like, if this black lab mix had been in this house with this crime scene and doors open, and you got a little kid running around staining walls and bloody mess, this dog would be in the middle of that, and you would have paw prints everywhere too.
You would imagine so.
But none. 2 diapers were found in the trash can, which were not rolled up and taped the way Jason and Michelle did it. Like, Michelle was very meticulous about this is how we dispose of these diapers. And Jason changed the diapers the same way, did the same disposal method. And it was like a stranger had changed the child's diaper. And when they found Cassidy, she didn't have a diaper on at all. She was found in pants but no diaper. And Cassidy couldn't dress herself, as I've mentioned. And it didn't appear that the child had been left alone like all night and into the next day, because she was clean and she had been cared for in that time period. They were like, if this baby had been, 12 or 14 hours or 6 hours or however long with no underpants, no diaper, she's not potty trained, she would have made a mess at some point, right? Like, she would have peed herself. She might have pooped herself.
You'd think so.
And there's these 2 diapers that are just thrown in the trash can, not rolled up. So someone has been there in the meantime changing this kid's diaper, it sounds like.
Someone who cares for the child. That's why they didn't want to leave her covered in blood. That's why they didn't want to leave her in a messy diaper, right? Mm-hmm. Much like when the people cover the victim's face, it's oftentimes because they can't stand to look at what they've done to the person they care about. So, yeah.
Well, and other people point to this as a reason why they don't think Jason did it, because they're like, he's a loving dad. He's not going to take the time to change the diaper, clean his baby up, but then leave her there with her dead mom. And why didn't he kill Michelle when Cassidy was out of town with like visiting her grandparents or something? You know, there's like a million other ways this could have gone down.
Okay.
I'm not done though.
What?
There's some more from this book, and then we're going to wrap it up. When Jason's sister Kim and her husband Steven had changed the locks, so they were at the house. By this point, you know, most of everything's been moved out of the house. They've been kind of cleaning it, getting it arranged, because it's gonna go on the market. Like Jason's already gone to Brevard. There's a media fiasco, circus happening, and he took the baby and was like, I just need to get out of town. They put this house up for sale after this horrific crime happened. So his sister and her husband were over there, like, and they changed the locks on the doors because they were like, if somebody did come in that had access to a key or something, like that key's out there, like it's best to change the locks. So they're like getting everything ready. And at one point, Meredith and Linda showed up and demanded to be let in the house. Kim and Steven were like, you don't need to be in the house. Like, there's nothing in here. You've already come in and taken everything that you wanted. There's no reason for you to come in here.
Like, why are you even here?
Exactly. Meredith and Linda began banging on the doors and windows for like 45 minutes and were like having a violent tantrum outside. Then they used their car to block the couple's truck in the driveway. And when the couple came out and got in their truck and were like, y'all need to move, Kim said that Meredith and Linda started banging on the truck's windows and stuff and like yelling at them. And Kim was like, why? Like, what possible reason would y'all have to act so violently about getting into this empty house that's going to go up for sale?
Yeah.
And if y'all are capable of acting like this, then
what else are you capable of?
Yeah. And for what? I mean, because what reason do you have to act that way? It just shows that these are like temperamental people and sometimes irrational and have the potential to be explosive, kind of over whatever. So Wake County crime scenes are investigated by the City County Bureau of Investigation, CCBI, which is like a separate kind of agency. So when there's a crime in Wake County, CCBI will go in and collect evidence for forensic testing. And some people believe this is a disadvantage when it comes to crime scenes because investigators go in, see the crime scene, know what they're kind of looking for. But this separate agency comes and collects and bags stuff, so they could very easily miss something when it comes to processing crime scene material.
Right, because they're two removed entities, right?
Yep.
And we all know about communication between departments and things like that.
And investigators had noted some issues with Meredith's story, like the no dog prints in the house, though she claimed he was inside when she arrived. There wasn't blood all over the house, like as she had stated in this 911 call. I mean, there was blood, but she made it sound
like it's on the ceiling and the
just
walls.
everywhere. Yeah. And they were like, well, there was, but it was not like that. And they thought it was weird that she made absolutely no effort to turn her sister's body. Now, she says she couldn't do it. It was stiff. Or that she had not attempted to try any kind of life-saving measures. Like while the dispatcher's on the phone, like, can you turn her over, give her CPR? Meredith's like, nope, she's dead. Not going to do it. And they just thought that was weird because they're like, in most cases, even if someone is dead, their loved one immediately is doing everything they can.
They're having to tell them to stop when they shouldn't be doing it because you're trying to do something to help. Yeah.
And on top of it, she had no verifiable alibi for a good part of the night or the morning into November 3rd. She claims she got off work, went and had a nightcap with a friend. She didn't come home sometime between like 3 and 4 in the morning. So from like midnight to like 4 a.m., they were just kind of relying on Meredith being like, oh, well, I was out driving around and then I went and got a snack at the gas station.
So she has way more opportunity to do this. Is this what you think?
And Blanchard pointed to the fact that, you know, they had television and they seemed to only hyper-focus on Jason. Now, if you remember, there was a neighbor named Cynthia Beaver. Her recollection of witnessing a male and female in the light-colored SUV, her description of the woman matched Meredith. She said the woman was a heavy-set white woman with dark-colored frizzy hair. It was sitting in the passenger seat. And Meredith has dark-colored, probably shoulder-length, kind of curly, it's like really curly hair, which is exactly the way Cindy Beavers described seeing this person. Police seemed to ignore that detail and just dismissed it. It was around 6 a.m., and she was a problem witness for police because that meant Jason couldn't be sitting in the driveway that late. Like, he would have already had to be on the road back to Virginia at that point. So they totally, like, didn't want to engage with this woman, even though she's giving them evidence.
And that's a bad sign. When they get tunnel vision, they disregard things that don't support the narrative they've already got played out in their head.
And some of these witnesses describing this light-colored SUV thought that maybe whoever was sitting in the car, that it was Michelle's car, because she had a, like, really light silver-colored Lexus SUV, like a little compact SUV. And that's how people were describing this, as like this light-colored, kind of small SUV.
Not the square Ford Explorer.
White, yeah.
Because in 2006, the little Explorers were still rather square, right?
Yep.
Or were they rounded off at that point?
I mean, they had more of a round shape. They were still that, like, square.
Those two vehicles...
They're still a bigger vehicle, and it's an obvious difference between a Lexus SUV, because they're more round and have more of the sporty look, even back then, versus what an Explorer would look like. 4-door,
more
bigger,
square.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Meredith, if you remember, had, when she'd gone into the house, I believe I said this, she had placed her car keys on the hood of Michelle's vehicle when she walked into the house, allegedly. And so when it was a crime scene, like, she couldn't get to her car keys, she couldn't get to her car. It was one reason why the police, like, had to give her a ride, because it was part of the crime, all this stuff. So she didn't have them, and so people were like, it's really weird that you would just sit your keys on somebody's hood and go in the house. It's almost like you got out of that car, put the keys on the hood, and went in.
Ah,
right?
Yes.
I mean, there are so many other details in this book. You definitely should check it out if you find this case fascinating. Again, I'm going to give you my resources. Murder on Birchleaf Drive by Stephen Epstein. The true story of the Michelle Young case was my main resource for today's case. Excellent book, like, really well written. It's kind of the style of true crime book that I really appreciate, the way he's just, lays it out. Then there is Absence of Evidence, which is by Lynn Blanchard, and it's called An Examination of the Michelle Young Murder Case. And then, of course, there's tons of articles, because this is a fairly recent story. You can find tons of news articles. The Raleigh News Observer, WRAL, have all reported extensively on this case.
Wow, you must have had a ton of information, because that was one long story you put together.
I know, I'm really sorry about that.
I'm not.
I figured we needed a good case.
I'm not. It's been a while since we did a nice, long, juicy one, and we had lots of sidebar.
We got burned out with Charles Manson, I think.
And but I've enjoyed it. It's a very interesting case.
What do you think happened? I just have to say, I know I try to play devil's advocate with information. And so I'm not really taking a side in this because, I mean, honestly, he probably is guilty, probably is. I'm going to say that. However, if I had been on a jury and there was no, like, real physical evidence and it was mostly circumstantial, I don't think I could convict him. Beyond a reasonable doubt.
I couldn't get past the fact that if he beat her like this and had to, he didn't have that much time, honestly, to get cleaned up and stuff and back on the road. I guess he could have, showered and changed everything. But I would have a problem with that. And the issues with the crime scene. These things that author brought up about the dog, was the dog in the house, who cleaned the baby up. I would have issues with that. I couldn't just overlook that. I don't know if they were introduced to that, those facts, but it'd be a tough one because they both, well, I know they weren't, it doesn't sound like introduced to the theory that it was possibly her sister, but they both had opportunity to have committed this crime. And then if it was her sister, she could very well be harboring a rage against her sister to, do this type of crime.
Here's where my brain went immediately when I was reading the second book about Meredith as a suspect. And now, do I think her sister did it? Probably not. But again, beyond a reasonable doubt,
Right.
there's some stuff there that makes me go, like I'm CNC Music Factory, right? I thought about this. Michelle wanted to name Meredith as the guardian of Cassidy. Right?
In effect, would be the executor of the estate. I mean, honestly, if you're taking care of if you're the guardian of the child, you would have access to the estate, would you not?
Yes, I would think so.
Okay.
Right? You've got this violent crime, obviously some rage, some issue there, jealousy. I mean, it could all fit in, right? 2 sets of footprints, which is strange to me because they're just saying one person did it, but where did the second set of footprints come from? You have an eyewitness placing a male and female there.
Right.
Then you've got these closets that have been rummaged through. And that Dr. Godwin said it was like somebody was looking for something specific. I started thinking about Meredith could have been like digging through trying to find the paperwork.
For the will
to
and the
show
guardianship.
that she has custody. Because the minute that Jason takes this baby and goes to Brevard, she and her mom start this, we're filing for visitation, which North Carolina doesn't have like a grandparents' visitation law. Some states do. And making a big stink about the weekends and when they could see her and having a lot of conflict, and eventually filed, and Jason ended up giving them custody of his daughter. So it just makes me think, you know, if there's a motive, when people will be like, well, what is the motive in this case? Cassidy could be the motive, because Meredith, mad at her sister for whatever reason, who knows, if she did murder her, you know, this is all speculation. She wanted she wanted that baby, and she was going to get that baby one way or another.
Okay.
And when she didn't find the custody paperwork, then they're going to take it to court. She and Linda are going to get custody of this baby. You know, and maybe Meredith saw Jason and Michelle back and forth and knew Michelle's never going to leave him. He's probably always going to be a cheating dog, and this poor baby's going to grow up in this chaos. And maybe she thought she was like doing right by the baby. I mean, who knows? That's just where my brain went with this.
Okay. I guess we'll never know the truth.
I guess we won't. But I still
Gosh.
think the theory, at first I was like, what? But once I got into the book and started reading some of it, it's an interesting theory, and it does make me think this is not 100% sealed up, perfect case.
Well, when you first said that, I was like, what? No way. Why? But, I mean, the nuts and bolts of that theory are kind of compelling,
There's
honestly.
motive, there's access.
Well, that was another thing as a juror. Like, there's 2 sets of footprints. We're not going to talk about this. You know what I mean?
We're not going to talk about a dog.
We're not going to talk about the 2 sets of bloody
There's a lot
footprints.
of inconsistencies with what you're saying on this 911 call versus the physical, what we're finding at the house, like the dog and all that.
Well, that was a great story. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
A classic, a banger, dare I say. And I really enjoyed that. Right?
Well, we've been a little late, so hopefully this big, long episode will find you well. And we do have a midweek coming out, so stick around for that. Email mountainmurdererspodcast@gmail.com if you have feedback or want to send us a listener story. We're gathering those up for the month of October. Dylan, we love them. Tell them you love them.
I love you all.
Bye.